Enjoy this UFO and Alien Encounter marathon. This super compilation features all 3 volumes of our Scary Alien Stuff series, each packed with various UFO and alien encounters. Sit back, relax, and let the uninterrupted marathon play as we journey from Volume 3 all the way back to Volume 1. Volume 3.
Story 1. Dear Eerie Encounters team, I recently watched one of your videos where a viewer shared their eerie experience. It resonated deeply with me, prompting me to share my own extraordinary encounter. Since it has been many years, I do believe on the condition of anonymity. It would be safe to share this story with you. I won't be using our real names though. Simply call me Pierre. I worked as a scientist. A long time ago, I was stationed at a remote research facility on Kerguelen Island. This desolate and windswept place is one of the most isolated on Earth, ideal for our climate and geological research, but also, as it turned out, a hotspot for the inexplicable. It was a summer's day when my colleague Odette and I embarked on a field research trip far from Port-au-Français, which is what the base is called. The day began uneventfully as we collected rock samples and gathered data for our study. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape, something peculiar caught our attention on a nearby beach. It appeared to be a heap of objects. Most beaches on Kerguelen are bustling with colonies of marine animals like sea lions, penguins, and others as summer is breeding season. Despite this beach being on the smaller side, it struck us as eerie that there were no animals in the vicinity whatsoever. We approached the heap cautiously, and what we discovered was grisly and repulsive. The heap of objects turned out to be a collection of body parts and carcasses from various marine animals, mammals, crustaceans, birds, octopi, penguins, fish, jellyfish, shellfish, and more. It was the vilest thing I have ever seen. I felt sick to my stomach. Besides the bizarre occurrence of finding such a collection of mutilated creatures in one spot, there were several other strange irregularities. All the creatures were dismembered with surgical precision, displaying cuts that were the most precise I had ever seen. These were not caused by any natural process. It seemed as though someone had dumped the creatures as one would with a dumping truck, yet there were no such vehicles on Kerguelen Island, no conceivable way for such a vehicle to access the area, and no tire or footprints present anywhere. We both deduced that they must have been dropped from a hovering vehicle only a few meters above the ground. However, there was none of the typical wind blast damage that a helicopter's rotor would cause to the nearby flora or the sand. The carcasses appeared fresh, indicating that this event had occurred recently. Yet perhaps the strangest aspect of all was that this potential feast of meat did not attract a single carnivore or scavenger on an island teeming with such animals, not even a single crab. In fact, it seemed as though all creatures kept well clear of the beach. Both of us were thoroughly puzzled, and as we grasped the strangeness of the phenomenon, an eerie feeling settled over us. There was an ominous atmosphere lingering in the entire cove where this small beach was situated. Then we noticed another strange phenomenon. As we stood there, trying to make sense of the mutilation, we observed 2 cylindrical objects hovering in the distance. They moved slowly with an eerie smoothness, unlike any aircraft we had ever seen. They hovered above the landscape, but with no point of reference, we had no idea how far away they were. The craft then appeared to land, but as they did, they vanished from sight due to the irregular terrain. I quickly grabbed my camera with a telescopic lens and managed to snap 2 shots before they disappeared completely. Our sense of unease grew, and we decided to head back to Port-au-Français and report what we had seen. However, our journey back took an even more sinister turn. I grabbed the VHF radio we had brought along and tried to contact the base to send a helicopter, but all I could get was static. As we made our way across the uneven rocky landscape, we felt an unsettling presence, the distinct feeling of being watched and followed. We still had a long way to go, about an hour on foot to reach the base. We've stayed out longer than we should have. After about 10 minutes, Odette, who was glancing back frequently, suddenly grabbed my arm and said, "They're following us." I turned, and what I saw thoroughly unnerved me. About 500 meters away, there were 4 figures. I took out the binoculars. What I saw shocked me. They were green-grayish in color, with heads that seemed thoroughly reptilian, matching the shade of the bodysuits they were wearing. I said to Odette, "We need to run," but she insisted on also taking a look with the binoculars. She looked for barely a couple of seconds before clenching my arm and murmuring, "Oh God, what is that?" Understanding the urgency, I told her we needed to drop our backpacks with our equipment and samples and start running, which we did immediately. Navigating the rough terrain without a clear path was challenging. Every now and then we glanced back, only to see those figures closing the distance between us. They were clearly faster than us, and a horrifying thought crossed my mind that we might end up like the mutilated carcasses we had seen on the beach. When they closed the distance to only about 200 meters behind us, they seemed to slow their pace to match ours. By this time, we were thoroughly horrified. Seeing them maintain the gap between us brought a sense of relief, though by no means comfort. For a moment, I entertained the chilling thought that they might be herding us into an ambush. It was dusk when we finally spotted Port-au-Français. The view of the base in the distance filled us with hope. As we approached within a kilometer of the base, they abruptly stopped pursuing us. Desperate and terrified, we sprinted the final stretch and burst into the base, immediately reporting our harrowing encounter to the head of the mission. I also told him about the pictures I had managed to capture of the 2 disc-shaped craft earlier. He instructed us to maintain absolute silence about the incident, to prevent alarming the other members of the mission on the island. He assured us that he would report the incident to his superiors in Paris, to determine if there was any potential threat posed by what we had witnessed. This seemed illogical to us. To Odette and I, it was clear the beings are hostile and thus a threat. Yet, despite the gravity of the situation, he appeared remarkably composed. Later that evening, he summoned us to his office where we joined a satellite radio call with our headquarters in Paris. This was before the internet. To our surprise, the meeting was attended by both the Administrator Superior of the Southern and Antarctic Lands Department as well as his boss, the Minister of Overseas France. Clearly, we have encountered something of great significance. The minister took charge of the conversation, emphasizing in no uncertain terms that the incident was not to be discussed further. He ordered that all reports we had written be destroyed and insisted that it would be in our best interest to forget the entire ordeal. In a dismissive tone, he added, "Don't let your imaginations run away with you. This never happened, and you will erase it from your thoughts." After that, the base security officer thoroughly searched both Odette's and my quarters. He confiscated our cameras, returning them the next day without the film cartridges. Thus, I lost the pictures I took of the hovering cylinder-shaped craft. For days afterward, we couldn't shake the unnerving feeling of being watched. This experience has haunted me ever since. The profound isolation of Kerguelen Island, coupled with the inexplicable events we witnessed, made it a truly harrowing ordeal. Yet what gets to me most is that, after all these years, I still have nightmares about the heap of carnage we found on that life-deserted beach. In the dream, I am always being chased and hunted by reptilian monsters. I feel like that sickening experience has scarred me forever. Despite the horror it has caused me, I still ponder why those beings stopped closing the distance between us. They could have easily caught up with us long before we got to the base. Were they trying to do us harm, or were they merely chasing us to scare us? I have so many questions. What was the heap of marine animal carnage we saw on that remote beach? Did the reptilians cause that, and for what purpose? Are these alien creatures biological researchers from another world, or are they vicious predators? Another question that deeply bothers me to this day is the apparent cover-up by my superiors and our government. What was that about? To these and many other questions, I will never have the answers. The entire episode remains both an emotional and intellectual frustration. I will never understand what happened there. Sincerely, Pierre. Story 2. Hi, simply call me Oleg. This is a long story, so I am writing it in a series of emails, rather than all at once. Please integrate them into one narration, and feel free to improve my style. I am not a natural storyteller, but I'd appreciate it if I could approve your final version. Anyway, let me begin. The story I am about to tell you comes from my grandmother, whom we lovingly called Baba, which is short for Babushka. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, me, my parents, my brother, and my maternal grandparents all left Moscow for the U.S. About a year later, my grandfather passed away. While her husband, my grandfather, had cancer, Baba spent all her time taking care of him and managing the household while both my parents worked. After that, my grandmother and I became very close. We were close before, but with my grandfather gone, she started focusing more on her grandchildren, me and my brother Sasha. My brother and I were in our early teens at that time. While my parents came home late from work, Baba would see to our needs, cooking, clean clothing, and more. She was quite a deep thinker, which is maybe why she and I connected so well. Sasha, on the other hand, was not so interested in Baba's stories. He was very much into his sports. We always knew Baba worked for some government ministry, but we never knew exactly what she did. In the Soviet Union, everyone was a civil servant, so that was very normal. However, during one conversation, I discovered that Baba worked for the KGB. Being interested in anything involving intrigue, mention of the KGB sparked my interest in her career history. One evening at the dinner table, Sasha made fun of a UFO-related program on TV. Baba warned him not to laugh. I could see she wanted to say something, but Mama gave her the look. Yet, Baba's reaction to Sasha's flippant remarks puzzled me. I later found out that Mama knew that Baba worked for an experimental unit within the KGB, but was never allowed to discuss the finer details with her family. I now also understand that the little bit Mama did know made her uncomfortable and so discouraged Baba from ever talking about it with us. The next day after school, I asked Baba why she was annoyed with Sasha laughing at the mention of aliens and UFOs on television. It turns out Baba worked for a special department in the KGB that investigated supernatural phenomena, etc. This piqued my interest, and over the weeks and months to come, I asked her many questions, and she shared a lot with me. Of course, I can't remember all the details she told me. She began her career with the KGB in her late 20s. Trained as a psychologist, Baba joined the specialized department to leverage her expertise. Her dual reporting lines were to both the department's commanding officer and the party. Her primary responsibility included monitoring the mental well-being of team members, crucial given the extraordinary situations they encountered. Additionally, she oversaw the induction of internal recruits. To supplement her duties, she managed all administrative tasks within the team, effectively serving as the commanding officer's de facto personal assistant. This role granted her access to a trove of information about individuals and numerous peculiar projects and incidents. The particular department conducted extensive research on various topics, particularly UFOs, and it went beyond mere research. One of the things she told me is that UFOs are not a new phenomenon. They have been around throughout human history and likely even prehistory. She also said they had artifacts, some technological, though extremely decayed. These artifacts were sourced from across the vast territories of the USSR, previously the Russian Empire and beyond. Apparently, much of it had been in a collection owned by the Tsars and also the Russian Orthodox Church before the 1917 revolution. A quick request: if you haven't subscribed yet and you value our videos, please hit the subscribe and like buttons and leave a comment below. It means the world to us. Now, let's return to our story. An extraordinary conclusion they reached from the earliest records, spanning ages up to modern observations, was the apparent lack of technological progress among these UFOs over millennia. They theorized that time travel might be involved, which could explain the lack of technological evolution over time. Either that, or wherever they are from, time is passing at a much slower rate. As in the rest of the world, abductions were also a phenomenon in the USSR. Similar to the West, Soviet citizens were not forthcoming about their experiences. While in the West experiencers often fear ridicule, in the Soviet Union the fear was more existential. People who claimed to have had encounters with aliens were labeled insane and got institutionalized, never to be free again. UFO activities increased during the Great Patriotic War, known as the Second World War in the West, and remained at that level afterwards. However, a year before the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb, the activity drastically increased. She said the UFO operators knew in advance what we were up to. As the USSR built up its nuclear arsenal, UFO activity and abductions increased. By the late 1950s, UFO activities at Soviet nuclear weapons facilities had become problematic. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev insisted that the KGB and the army find out what was happening, determine whether it posed a threat, and take action if necessary. Of course, the Soviets were also interested in the technology involved. Baba said they discovered from their American operatives that the Americans had been in so-called diplomatic contact with these entities since the Eisenhower administration. Khrushchev was apparently beside himself, according to a note she saw, as the USSR had no such contact. This prompted the need to establish communication with these entities. Receiving this order was both an exciting opportunity and a massive challenge. How to achieve such contact was a mystery by itself. However, the prospect of such communication promised valuable information about UFOs and their operators. Making contact was challenging. While Baba was not part of these operations, her administrative and support roles granted her access to a lot of classified information. Locating UFO activities ranged from easy to difficult, and various radio signals were sent in attempts to make contact. Even though Baba was no longer working for the KGB or living in Russia, she withheld some information from me. I sometimes think it was for two reasons: to protect me, and I have a suspicion that some of it was pretty dark and didn't sit well with her. None of the electronic technologies they tried for making contact delivered any results. In the early 1960s, they resorted to another joint military KGB program that used psychics to spy on the USA through deep meditative states. This is when they started having success. These operatives made contact with the entities on their first attempt. A protocol was then established for further communication, and from there, progress moved quickly. Soon the first face-to-face meeting with the entities was arranged. Baba was not present at these meetings, but she was responsible for collating and integrating all the reports from those involved. She mentioned there were only 2 face-to-face meetings in the first year, and in the subsequent years never more than 1 meeting per year. Not all information passed through her hands. Some of it was deemed so highly classified that only the head of the unit and the agents directly involved had access. I regrettably never asked how she knew this. I was only a teenager at the time. Though she shared these stories as a way to bond with me, recognizing my keen interest, I think it was also a means for her to process the past. In the U.S., she was in a different world and time and could talk about things that previously would have put her in a labor camp at least. Baba was never nostalgic about the Soviet Union. She was clearly very happy to be away from the KGB's grip. She once told me, "One never truly retires from the KGB." She explained that even though she was never an agent, after her retirement she was expected to keep tabs on the neighbors and report any strange activities. She hated it. The collapse of the USSR, the chaos in the following months, our emigration, and the dissolution of the KGB in 1991 meant she was free. She was the one who pushed my parents to get jobs in the U.S. so that we could all get out. There were a lot of things she did not want to talk about. She was terrified the Communist Party might somehow regain power. She only gave me morsels of what the agreements with the entities or UFO aliens involved. She said a deal was struck because the Soviets feared the entities were providing strategic information about their nuclear missile bases to the Americans. Up to that point, Soviet jets were scrambled whenever UFO blips appeared on radar. The MiGs and Sukhois, of course, were no match for the strange and fast maneuvers of the UFOs. However, in a few instances, missiles fired by these jets did hit UFO craft. At least one was shot down. Some were apparently damaged but did not come down. Generally, the chances of jets bringing down a UFO were very remote, but even that risk must have been unacceptable to their operators. Both sides wanted something, and both sides had something to give. An agreement was reached allowing the UFOs to operate freely in exchange for information on American strategic capabilities. Baba said it was ironic, as they were convinced the entities made the same deal with the Americans. She hinted at other details in the agreement, details that brought her to silence. She then seemed very depressed and changed the topic. She did reveal, as one might imagine, that after the agreement, reports of abductions increased significantly, even though Soviet citizens were generally not very forthcoming. Regarding how information about the Americans was shared, she said it was done in various ways. Sometimes it was relayed via the psychics. Other times, agents would receive phone calls where the person on the other side would speak to them, either in their own voice or the voice of a deceased loved one. At first, the agents found it quite disturbing, especially if it was a deceased family member's voice. Only once was she taken along to a face-to-face meeting with the entities. There was concern in the Kremlin as to how the negotiators were interacting with the entities, and thus, as psychologist, with the required clearance and knowledge of the subject matter, she was tasked to do a first-hand observation. She described it as the most surreal experience of her life. The whole event took place in a hangar at a secret Air Force base outside Moscow. These secret bases were scattered throughout the USSR. They arrived before the visitors. Tables were set out in the hangar. Humans would sit on one side and the visitors on the other. As they waited at the table, the phone rang, informing them that the visitors had arrived. She did not see the craft land. She mentioned, besides herself, The attendees were two senior agents and other high-ranking officials from the Kremlin, the KGB, and the military. Everyone went silent when the visitors came in. There were only 4 of them, accompanied by 2 Air Force officers guiding them to the table. Their footsteps were the only sound echoing through the vast hangar. It was an odd sight. They were short, the size of elementary school children, dressed in what seemed to be one-piece suits made from a black fabric. It had no collars or such. She said the sight of their huge bulbous heads and large black eyes sent shivers down her neck. She also mentioned something about their digits, though I can't recall if it was too many or too few. The chairs were almost too high for them, but they managed to take their seats much like children. Baba said the entities never appeared intimidated by the disproportionate human presence or our weapons. The humans spoke verbally, but the visitors communicated telepathically, and only to those they intended to hear their messages. Only the high-ranking officials at the table received their communications. She and the general's aide-de-camp were excluded. She couldn't assess the visitors' behavior, and that was in any case not her task. However, she still tried, but found it hard since she had no idea what they were communicating, and because they were so strange. So, she kept her focus on her task, which was to monitor her colleagues. The KGB agents did most of the talking and seemed superb at handling the situation, never appearing unnerved. However, she noted that the Kremlin official, and to a lesser extent the one general, seemed a little on edge. She recommended in her report that they be better prepared for dealing with non-human entities in future meetings. Furthermore, she said that one of the entities looked her way several times, which made her quite uncomfortable. Though she couldn't be certain it was looking directly at her, as their eyes lacked visible pupils and she couldn't pinpoint their gaze, she could feel her thoughts being scanned. It was the strangest feeling of her life. She described it as an echo in her thoughts, which at times impeded her from her monitoring role. She felt thoroughly unnerved when this happened, but managed to hide it well from her colleagues, thanks to her training. However, she was pretty sure the entity knew exactly what she was experiencing. There's much more to share about this event, but it's getting long, so I will only mention 2 more things about it. Baba mentioned an interesting personal observation. She said that the moment those entities entered the room, despite having no outward signs of gender, she immediately felt they emanated a female presence. She attributed this to her own female intuition, as the men had no idea what gender the entities were. The most staggering of her intuitive senses, however, was this. As strange as they were, there was something terribly familiar about them, like they belonged here, like they were part of us. Baba said that experience had a significant impact on her life. She mentioned that in the years that followed, they discovered the information provided by the entities about the U.S. military was generally of little value. It was either information they already knew or simply low-value data. It seemed like the entities were deliberately withholding much from them. Through strategically positioned agents in the U.S., the KGB learned that the entities were playing the Americans in the same way. Baba concluded that the entities exploited the mistrust between the USA and USSR to gain unchallenged access to our airspace and other concessions. The USSR received little in return. She said it often seemed as though the entities were deliberately trying to confuse the humans with contradictory information. She would say with a sense of repulsion, "It seemed they wanted access to our minds, and we gave it to them." Her assessment of them was that they were deceitful and seemed to enjoy misleading the humans. She often fell silent, mentioning her serious upset with some of the agreements reached with them, but she had no authority to express her views. She never elaborated, becoming very sad and quiet instead. There were terrible things she hinted at but never fully explained. She said her seniors felt frustrated by their interactions with the entities, and over the years, the entire project failed and was abandoned in phases, or at least that's what she was led to believe. It was not uncommon for some secret projects to be shut down and then simply reopened under a different cell within the KGB. This ensured that the lower echelons, like herself, lost track of a project's progress. In a totalitarian system like the USSR, having many people know only bits and pieces was seen as less of a threat than having a few people know too much. Those who knew only fragments of information would never speak out for fear of ending up in a labor camp, or worse, while those who knew too much would have enormous leverage to gain control over their superiors. Baba said only the highest-ranking officials really knew what happened with the project, but she was gradually moved on to other projects of a less strange nature. Given her central administrative role in the unit, I sensed that Baba knew more than she should have, which might explain why she feared the KGB all her life. Baba passed away in 2000, and I regret not having the foresight to write down or audio record her experiences at the KGB. I believe a great deal of valuable and interesting information went to the grave with her. Regards, Oleg. Story 3. Hi there. After reading a viewer's comment on one of your videos about a strange experience they had with a family member, I noticed striking parallels to my own experience and decided to share it with you. My family owns a beach house in a small coastal town on the Mexican Gulf. I'll keep the town's name confidential to protect the locals and preserve its peaceful atmosphere from potential UFO hunters. For the sake of anonymity, I have replaced our actual names with pseudonyms. One summer vacation while visiting our holiday home, my little brother and I had a very strange experience. Jimmy, a latecomer or caboose baby, is 14 years younger than my sister Samantha, who is 4 years younger than me. Jimmy adored me and we cherished him deeply, as one does with a much younger sibling. Unfortunately, Jimmy suffered from a very dangerous condition. At the age of 5, he was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm. Due to its size and position in the brain, the surgeons felt that operating would be more dangerous than letting him live with it. Some aneurysms, due to their location or size, are deemed too risky for surgery because accessing them surgically could cause significant harm. Jimmy fell into this category. Living with the knowledge that Jimmy could die at any day and any moment was a terrible ordeal for my parents and the entire family. One night, Jimmy and I went for a walk on the beach. It was pretty late, around 10 o'clock, but my parents allowed Jimmy to stay up later during holidays. He was only 6 years old. It was a warm summer evening when we spotted something strange. As we walked along the beach with the waves washing around our feet, Jimmy pointed out a bluish light over the water. At first, it seemed like a star, but it quickly became clear that it was not far off in the distance but very close to us. It started as a dot of light, then gradually expanded into a circle. We stood there in awe, watching this incredible sight on a tranquil evening with the water around our feet. It was both scary and immensely beautiful. Then something truly awesome happened. Hundreds of little lights emerged from the circle. Later I thought of the circle of light as a sort of portal that allowed these little lights to enter our world. They looked almost like fireflies, but fireflies don't come from a light portal. They don't normally fly over the sea, and they certainly don't have a bluish tint. These little points of light floated in the air about a meter above the water, gently moving around as they dispersed. Meanwhile, the circle or portal closed up. The little lights then started moving towards each other, still over the water. Gradually, they coalesced into one huge orb of light. At this point, I told Jimmy that we should probably leave. However, Jimmy was not scared at all. He seemed completely mesmerized by the sight. The light orb suddenly moved towards us. I was horrified. Before I could grab Jimmy to run, it came right up to us, pushing me away and completely enveloping him. I fell backwards onto the sand. As I lay there looking at it, the light flashed incredibly bright, to the extent that I could not see my little brother, only the intense light. I was terrified. In that light, which had the force to throw me across the sand, was my little brother, whom I cared for deeply. This lasted only a few seconds. Then the light started losing its intensity, and the next moment it seemed like static on an old television screen, before it fragmented back into hundreds of separate little points of light. I noticed my little brother's body lying on the sand. As I got back onto my feet, this swarm of light started moving rapidly, forming a long, stretched-out line-shaped formation heading back toward the portal that had silently opened behind me. I rushed to Jimmy, who was coming too. He seemed a bit dazed. I wanted to carry him, but he insisted on walking. I was shocked at what had happened, but besides a bit of a dazed state, Jimmy seemed completely fine. He was totally unperturbed. Eventually, I insisted on carrying him home, which is about a 10-minute walk from where this happened, and he allowed me to do so. During our walk, neither Jimmy nor I spoke about what had happened. When we got home, he said he wanted to go to bed. I greeted our parents as we entered the house and immediately took him to his room, tucking him in for the night. As I came back downstairs, Mom asked why Jimmy was not taking a bath, but I assured her he was tired and should bathe in the morning. Obviously, I yearned to tell my parents about what happened, but then I thought about how unbelievable the entire event sounded. If they didn't believe me, they might think I was making it up, and if they did believe me, they would be terrified about what happened to Jimmy. So, I decided to calm down and say nothing. Believe me, that was really hard. The next day, Jimmy seemed fine, energetic, and playful as usual. I gently asked him about the previous evening, but he had no recall of the lights or the event. About a month later, Jimmy had his regular checkup at the neurology clinic. My mom and Samantha took him that day while Dad was at work. The clinic made a surprising discovery. Jimmy's aneurysm had completely disappeared. The brain tissue that was once displaced by it had now filled the space where the aneurysm was. A few weeks later, my mother shared with me that on the day she and my sister brought Jimmy back from the clinic, she was a bit surprised. Jimmy didn't seem as excited about the news as she and Samantha were. At first, she thought maybe Jimmy, being a little boy, didn't fully understand the significance of the diagnosis. She asked him if he was surprised or happy about what the doctors had found. Jimmy responded saying, "But I already knew, because the man in the light told me they were fixing me." Intrigued, she asked him who he meant by the man in the light, and all Jimmy said was, "At night, on the beach." She chalked it up to a child's vivid imagination and left it at that. When she told me this, I felt compelled to share the whole story of the event Jimmy and I experienced at the beach with both my mother and father. My mother believes me, but my dad remains skeptical, simply saying, "I'm sure you guys experienced something." I tried to approach the topic with Jimmy later on, but he seemed completely unaware of what I was referring to. Jimmy recently graduated as an architect. He leads a vibrant and healthy life. We haven't revisited the topic of that night since, but whatever happened there, I believe it healed him and paved the way for his future. Sincerely, Arnold.
Story 4. Hello. I apologize for writing this in Spanish, but if you're reading it in English, you've obviously managed to translate it. Please edit the style as you see fit. Let me start. I am sharing a story that has been a secret in my family for a very long time. This story was shared with me by my mother, Rosario, who was the youngest daughter of a wealthy cattle farmer in the Pampas. My mother was the youngest of 10 siblings, with 7 sisters and 2 brothers. The eldest was Valentina, followed by Juan and then Diego. The rest were all sisters. My grandfather was Carlos, and my grandmother was Sofia. To avoid using generational titles, I will henceforth refer to them by name. When Valentina was 14 years old, she would assist her mother with the household, as was customary in large families back then. Even in families who could afford servants, this was the custom. When Rosario was born, her mother could not nurse her due to having glandular fever. From her birth, Rosario was nursed on cow's milk and nurtured by Valentina, resulting in a stronger bond between them than with her mother. The Argentine Pampas, the region where the family lived, is a grassy landscape ideal for cattle farming. The vast plains are only occasionally interrupted by low-lying hills. Due to the large ranches in the region, it was sparsely populated. The homestead, with its complex of barns and quarters for maids and laborers, was many miles away from the nearest neighbors or town. Because of this distance, Carlos hired a full-time teacher and set up a small school on the farm for his children and those of the laborers. The men who worked for Carlos did not like venturing into the hilly area when cattle strayed there. Carlos's exceptionally large farm included an area with these low-lying hills, though far in the distance provided good vistas from the veranda of the main homestead. The men mentioned seeing strange lights in that area at night. Up to that point, neither Carlos nor his family had seen anything unusual, so Carlos, a hard and staunch man, would become very angry at the men and their tales. However, Carlos's view on the men's fear changed when he once saw the lights over the hills when standing on the veranda of their large villa one evening, smoking his pipe. He and the family were sitting on the veranda after dinner, enjoying the warm summer evening. Despite this sighting, Carlos did not ascribe any supernatural meaning to it. He did not believe in such things. In fact, he did not even believe in God. Sofia and the children went to Mass on Sundays without him. Although the rest of the family also saw the lights, which scared the smaller children, Carlos dismissed the lights as a natural phenomenon, possibly related to the magnetic fields in the hills, something he believed geologists of the future would be able to explain. A week later, an even stranger event took place. It was very late at night, and everyone was already asleep when the family was woken by an intense light coming from the garden. As they gathered on the veranda to see what was happening, they saw an orb of light, similar to those they had seen darting over the hills the previous week, hovering over their garden. Sofia and the children immediately started to pray, believing it to be an angelic appearance. The orb emitted static electricity, causing the girls' long hair to stand on end. It hovered for a while before shooting off in the direction of the hills. The family was quite shaken by the event, but eventually went back to sleep and continued with their lives afterward. In the summer of 1940, Valentina turned 19. Her parents were keen for her to find a well-to-do suitor. With Carlos being a wealthy and land-rich farmer, he was confident that his eldest daughter, a fair maiden, would find an upcoming young farmer in the district. However, about a month after the mysterious orb-like light hovered over the garden, they noticed that Valentina was not well. At first, they thought she might have an illness of a passing nature. As the weeks went by and Valentina continued to fall ill every morning, Carlos became concerned not only for her health, but also about the possibility that a sickly girl would struggle to find a husband. When Valentina's condition did not improve, Carlos called the doctor. After the doctor left, Rosario remembers both Carlos and Sofia being very upset. Valentina was summoned to Carlos's study. The doors were closed. All the children were sent to their rooms. Harsh words were heard from the study. My mother, Rosario, who was only 5 years old at the time, could not make sense of it, but remembers the loud shouting as one of her early memories. The ordeal of hearing her beloved eldest sister getting a severe scolding from their father left a painful imprint on her. In the period that followed, there was a somber mood in the house. The atmosphere was heavy with tension and worry, and the family struggled to understand and cope with the situation. Valentina's illness and the mysterious events surrounding the lights in the hills cast a long shadow over the household, altering the once harmonious family dynamic. About 2 months later, one evening at the dinner table, Carlos sent the maids who usually served at dinner to their quarters. He then announced to the family that Valentina had brought disgrace upon the family. As the father, responsible for protecting the family's standing, he had made the decision that Valentina would no longer be allowed to venture outside the house. Because of this, 5-year-old Rosario understood that disgrace was something that happened when one got ill and did not recover. Valentina was to be seen only by the family, the 2 maids, and the elderly houseboy, Ricardo. Everyone was sworn to absolute secrecy. Thus, Valentina became a prisoner of her presumed indiscretion. No one was to discuss Valentina's situation with each other, and certainly not with anyone from outside. Rosario remembers Valentina telling her, in a moment of care, that no matter what anyone ever tells her, she must always remember that Valentina had never been with any man. Of course, little Rosario did not understand what "with a man" meant. Living in a house with a father and 2 brothers, and with 7 permanent male laborers on the ranch, they were constantly around men. Rosario decided that her sister's illness made her say strange things. As time went on, the family adapted to this new reality. Valentina's confinement and the mysterious circumstances surrounding it became a part of their daily lives. Rosario, with her childlike innocence, continued to love and support her sister, even as the rest of the family struggled with the weight of the unspoken shame and the secrets that now shadowed their lives. However, Valentina's situation grew more complicated. Her health seemed to fluctuate inexplicably. One moment she would appear almost normal, the next she would be bedridden, gripped by a strange malaise the family doctor couldn't adequately explain. He couldn't find any logical cause and was increasingly mystified, as the symptoms did not match that of a person who were in the same so-called condition. One evening, as Rosario sat with Valentina in her room, the older sister confided in her again. This time, Valentina spoke of dreams, vivid, disturbing dreams of the lights in the hills and the orb that had hovered over the garden. She described being enveloped in a blinding light and feeling an intense, almost electric energy coursing through her body. Valentina's voice trembled as she recounted these experiences, and Rosario, though still too young to fully grasp the implications, felt a deep sense of fear and confusion. Valentina's health continued to decline, and the mysterious lights in the hills seemed to grow more frequent, casting an eerie glow over the ranch at night. The laborers whispered amongst themselves, their fear of the hills intensifying. Carlos, though still outwardly dismissive of any supernatural explanations, could not ignore the growing unease among his workers and within his own family. As months passed, the once vibrant and joyous household became a place of quiet desperation and unspoken questions. The events that had unfolded, the lights, Valentina's so-called illness, and the family's enforced silence, had woven a web of mystery and fear that ensnared them all. With no one talking about the situation, Rosario could not learn much. She continued to watch, while her love for Valentina remained undiminished by the strange and troubling circumstances that now defined their lives. Over the months that followed, Rosario watched as Valentina's belly grew larger, not understanding what was happening, but knowing she was not allowed to ask questions. About 5 months into Valentina's condition, trucks and equipment from a construction company showed up. Rosario remembers the sense of relief that Carlos seemed to display, telling the man with the papers that he had been waiting long enough for them to start their work and that they needed to move fast because time was running out. The very next day, they started constructing a road, which took them 10 days to complete. The road wound into the hills and disappeared between them. After that, for a few days, trucks filled with building materials would arrive and take the road into the hills, coming back empty again. Soon, there was daily activity of laborers going to the hills, every morning and returning each evening. Carlos himself, along with the architect, would join them each day. This carried on for 3 months, and then one day abruptly stopped. It was as if Valentina's so-called illness was timed to the completion of the activity in the hills, because a week later, Valentina started experiencing severe tummy pains. That night, Sofia and 2 of the maids spent all night with Valentina. The next morning at breakfast, the family was summoned for a meeting. Carlos informed them that their sister had given birth to a baby girl the previous night. He had informed the teacher that those who were still attending school would be late. They needed to use the morning to say goodbye to their sister. He had a house built for her in the hills, and that is where she and the child would live. None of them were ever to visit her. Only their mother and Ricardo, the 70-year-old houseboy, were to go there once a week to ensure she had all she needed. Yet, Carlos did not seem his usual confident self. He seemed shaken, and 5-year-old Rosario assumed it was because he was upset at his daughter's imminent departure. The morning was filled with a somber atmosphere as the siblings gathered to say their farewells. Valentina, pale but composed, held her newborn close. The baby girl, swaddled in a soft blanket with the face hidden from view, was a quiet reminder of the strange and troubling events that had transpired over the past months. The children, confused and saddened, could barely comprehend the gravity of the situation. They hugged Valentina tightly, tears streaming down their faces, and whispered their goodbyes. Rosario, being so young, could not fully understand why her beloved sister had to leave. She clung to Valentina, not wanting to let go, feeling a deep sense of loss and confusion. Valentina kissed her forehead and whispered reassuring words, though the sadness in her eyes betrayed her true feelings. As the sun began to rise, a small convoy of vehicles arrived to take Valentina and her baby to their new home in the hills. Sofia and Ricardo accompanied them, carrying supplies and essentials for the new house. Carlos watched from a distance, his face a mask of stoic resolve, but his eyes revealed a glimmer of regret and sorrow. The convoy disappeared into the hills, leaving behind a family grappling with the sudden and painful departure of their eldest daughter. The house felt emptier, and an unspoken heaviness hung in the air. The children, especially Rosario, struggled to adjust to the absence of Valentina, who had been such an integral part of their lives. Days turned into weeks, and life on the ranch slowly resumed its routine. However, the mysterious lights in the hills continued to appear, now viewed with a mix of fear and curiosity by those who saw them. The laborers spoke in hushed tones, their fear of the hills deepening. The morning after the departure of Valentina and her child was filled with multiple shocks for Rosario. Learning that her sister had been pregnant all along, had given birth under secretive circumstances, and now faced permanent exile was a heavy burden for her young mind to bear. Reflecting back, Rosario understood why Carlos had chosen to hide Valentina in the hills, to protect her from the community's judgment and from potential harm given the superstitious fear surrounding the lights. Sofia and Ricardo made their weekly trips to visit Valentina, returning with updates that were shared sparingly and cautiously. Valentina and her baby were reported to be healthy, though the isolation weighed heavily on her. The family adhered strictly to Carlos's edict, maintaining the secrecy and isolation that had been imposed upon them. Rosario herself, though young, keenly felt the absence of Valentina's presence. The house felt quieter, emptier, and the unspoken heaviness lingered. Her memories of Valentina, now shrouded in secrecy and solitude, became a cherished yet painful part of her childhood. The hills, once a place of mystery and fear, now held the secret of their family's heartache and resilience. The sad situation persisted for 3 long years until one Saturday evening at the dinner table, Sofia broke the usual somber silence by pleading with Carlos. "She wants to see Rosario. I implore you, Carlos. It's been 2 years." "Are you crazy, woman? After what her baby did to me the morning it was born. I'm not exposing Rosario to that demon child by letting her go there." Despite Carlos's staunch refusal, Sofia continued to protest every night without success. Frustrated and desperate, she finally issued an ultimatum. "Carlos, you should come to Mass with me once. Father Pedro and the sisters keep asking me why they never see Valentina anymore. If you don't allow me to take Rosario to Valentina, I will tell Father Pedro and the whole congregation how you banished our daughter," she said in a fearful tone. The threat worked. The following Friday, 7-year-old Rosario found herself in the truck sitting between her mother and Ricardo, heading towards the house nestled between the hills. Rosario vividly remembers the scene: a well-built, comfortable house with 2 or 3 bedrooms, surrounded by a small garden and a vegetable patch, situated at the bottom of a gentle valley next to a brook. Her sister, who appeared much older than Rosario remembered, greeted her with immense happiness. Though Valentina's appearance had changed, Rosario found solace in her sister's embrace. Rosario's anticipation was high, but she was surprised not to see the child anywhere around. She was instructed to stay close to her mother and sister and not to wander. Reflecting on this later, Rosario realized they deliberately kept the child away from her. Sofia, driven by her longing to see her grandchild, went to the rooms in what seemed like a determined effort to catch a glimpse of the baby. Everything went as usual on that 5th Saturday. Rosario was happy to see her sister. They had tea and biscuits and enjoyed lots of laughter and chatting. Still, the child was nowhere to be seen, and Rosario started to wonder if there truly was a child and what all the fuss was about. Curiosity was getting the better of her, and she insisted on going to the bathroom. Carlos, always providing the best in a material sense, had the house outfitted with an indoor toilet, which was a luxury for the time. Rosario was instructed not to visit the rooms, and Sofia considered, "She is taking her morning nap and, in any case, knows she can't come out anymore on Saturday mornings." As Rosario came out of the bathroom, she heard a child's voice chanting a rhyme in one of the bedrooms. Rosario slowly opened the door and saw the strangest thing. There, on the floor, sat a little girl who appeared not much younger than her. She had the fairest grayish skin and the whitest hair. When she looked up at Rosario, her unusually large head displayed 2 extra large, mysteriously black eyes. When the little one smiled at her, Rosario experienced both fear and wonderment. She thought it was frightful and beautiful at the same time. To Rosario, it seemed like little Angel. It was a transformative moment for Sofia when she discovered Rosario and Amelia playing together in Amelia's room. Initially horrified, she was soon overwhelmed with relief. As Sofia, Amelia, and Rosario emerged hand in hand on the veranda, tears of joy streamed down Valentina's face as surprise gave way to relief and happiness. From that day on, Amelia was no longer kept hidden on Saturdays, and Rosario and Amelia's friendship blossomed in the weeks that followed. Despite Amelia's unusual appearance and her soft-spoken manner, which sometimes puzzled Rosario, their bond deepened. Rosario noticed peculiarities like Amelia not speaking verbally with her mother, but instead, mother and daughter would, from time to time, stare at each other for short moments. When Rosario inquired what it means, Amelia responded, "Mommy and I share thoughts." Rosario did not question it as it immediately made sense to her. To her, it seemed like the most natural form of communication between people who cared for each other, and she quietly felt a bit envious that she did not have the ability to share thoughts with her own loved ones. One Saturday morning by the brook, Amelia pointed toward some pebbles and said to Rosario, "Look." The next moment the pebbles were floating in the air. Rosario was exhilarated at discovering what Amelia is capable of. It was a moment of wonderment. Amelia, however, made her promise not to tell the adults what she shared with her, as her mother forbade her from doing such things in Rosario's presence. By the time Rosario was 11, Amelia appeared to be the same age. Valentina's health had deteriorated with each visit, causing Sophia increasing concern. The two girls had grown very close over the years, but Rosario began to notice something disturbing. Amelia had always disliked the small lizards that darted around the rocks by the brook, but now her dislike had turned into hatred. Rosario was horrified when she saw Amelia stunning a lizard simply by pointing at it, then picking up a rock and crushing its head. She was too shocked to say anything. As the weeks went on, Amelia's behavior became increasingly cruel. She would catch lizards by the brook, pull off their limbs while they were still alive, throw them on the ground and laugh hysterically as the little creatures tried to move. Then she would suddenly stomp on them. Rosario asked Amelia why she kept doing this. Amelia looked at her seriously with her huge eyes and said, "Because they are very, very bad." She never elaborated on what she meant. Rosario considered telling her mother about this behavior of Amelia, but did not want to get Amelia in trouble, so she kept it to herself. Rosario could not understand why this seemingly gentle friend of hers would be so heartlessly cruel. It made her very unhappy. By the age of 12, Amelia had outgrown Rosario, marking another turning point in their lives. Valentina now looked thoroughly worn out, appearing much older than her real age and sickly. One Saturday during a visit, Rosario recalled her thoughts repeating themselves. Then other thoughts followed, questioning the first thoughts in a jumbled mess. It felt like her mind was running around and she had no control over it. She turned around and noticed Amelia staring at her. And then a threatening voice echoed in her head. "Don't look at me. Look away." It was Amelia. She was in Rosario's mind. The following weekend, Rosario did not want to visit Valentina and Amelia, choosing to stay home instead. In the months that followed, she continued to stay home and never went back. At the age of 13, she finally asked her father what Valentina's baby did to him the morning after its birth. He took her to his office and said, "I assume the girl is the reason you never went back. I could not stop you from going because of your mother's threat to tell Father Pedro." An unusual display of courage for your mother, I must say. I could not chance it. I am glad you're not going to the hills anymore, Rosario. I will tell you this, but you must keep it to yourself. That morning, when I looked at that baby, I heard a screeching noise in my head. It was so bad it caused me enormous pain, but worse, it filled me with a sense of death. Not normal death like when your grandparents passed peacefully and went to heaven, but something evil, something hellish. A week later, the lights over the hills reappeared. One night, The activity was so intense that the family again stood on the veranda, watching in awe and fear. Sophia felt a deep concern for her daughter, who lived out there. She wanted to go the next day to check on her, but Carlos forbade it. The following night, a light again appeared late while everyone was sleeping. The family went outside, just as they had done many years earlier. The same light hovered over the garden. As they watched, they heard a deep sigh coming from Carlos. When the family looked, they saw him collapse. They rushed to him, but he was unconscious. Then the light shot straight upwards at high speed. By the time the doctor arrived later that night, he declared Carlos dead. The next day, Sophia, Ricardo, and Juan got into the truck and drove off to the hills. When they arrived at Valentina's house, they found her sitting on the stairs to the veranda, looking thoroughly morbid, her mind seemingly elsewhere. In the meantime, Sophia went looking for Amelia, but could not find her. When she returned, Valentina had come to, and Sophia asked where her child was. All Valentina could utter was, "They took her in the light." After that, my uncles Juan and Diego took charge of the ranch and the neighboring farm, which also belonged to Carlos. Most of the sisters went off to Buenos Aires to study as they came of age. Being a wealthy family, the sisters were part of the pioneering generation of women to become tertiary educated. Juan brought Valentina back home, and when he eventually got married, he had a beautiful villa built for her and their mother, Sophia, where both lived out their lives. My mother, Rosario, met a geology student at university. My father later became a foremost academic in his field, and my mother became a dentist. During one of our vacations, my father visited the Hills of the Lights and pronounced that there was geologically nothing strange about the place. He even had a meteorologist colleague investigate, and they couldn't find any reason for the strange occurrences of the past. Of course, my mother never told him the full story until much later in her life. I still have contact with my cousins who now farm out there. The lights, which appeared so many years ago and irrevocably affected my family, have never appeared again since the night my grandfather passed away. Yours faithfully, Carlos Jr.
Volume 2.
Whatever you're doing, this video will be more fun. Indulge in these 6 extraordinary alien encounters. These captivating accounts will keep you on the edge of your seat. Welcome to this thrilling episode. Stick around for our most gripping stories yet. Enjoy. Story 1. Hi, I'm Johan. After watching your video about the strange experience the couple Marlies and John had on the south coast of South Africa, I felt compelled to share my own story. Back in the early 1990s, I often explored the mountains of the Western Cape Province of South Africa. Me, my brother, and our spouses were often seeking adventure and new experiences. One particular hike stands out as a particularly strange and memorable experience. It was just the 4 of us, myself, my wife Cecile, my brother Rudolph, and his wife Mariska. We embarked on a hike up a remote creek on a farm nestled in one of the lesser populated valleys of the region. Our goal was to reach a cave high up in the creek known for its ancient Khoisan rock paintings. We were eager to view the paintings and explore the depths of the cave, which was rumored to be largely unexplored, with its true depths unknown. Because that entire section of the mountain is on private land, very few people have ever ventured up there. The farm has been in one family for many generations, and the story within their family is that the creek is haunted. Accessing the creek is not easy. One must navigate through a narrow valley which is an offshoot of the main valley. This small valley, which the farmer did not cultivate, was a beautiful, natural environment. This valley eventually narrows into a creek with many boulders and rock pools acting as obstructions. As you ascend further, it becomes even narrower and climbs at a steeper angle as it winds through the mountain. Getting to the creek was hard enough, but going up it was said to be quite arduous and sometimes perilous. The creek was thus truly remote and difficult to access. We were granted special permission from the owner to explore the creek, although he warned us that his family hadn't ventured up there for at least 3 decades due to strange occurrences. He was reluctant to elaborate. Among the local people of color, there is a tale passed down from their forefathers, the Khoi people, a group similar to the Sand people of the Kalahari. They believed that the creek was a sacred place where rituals were performed and sacrifices were made to the ancestral spirits who resided there. On the Friday night, we set up camp in the narrow, uncultivated valley before the creek, preparing for our hike up the creek the next day. On the Saturday, the weather was scorching hot, typical of summer days in the region. Despite the heat, the brook running down the creek had enough water to form several deep, cascading pools as we ventured further upstream. The creek itself was a marvel to behold, with steep walls rising up like upright cliffs. Along its course, the water formed numerous rock pools, each one incredibly deep. To continue our journey up the creek, we had to swim through these to then climb up rocks only to get to the next pool, and so on. The environment within the creek was like stepping into a different world. With only a few short hours of the scorching African sun shining directly into the creek each day, the flora was lush and vibrant. Cape Dizes, with their bright red flowers, clung to the rock faces, adding splashes of color to the green foliage and ferns that adorned the cliffs. The constant trickle of water created a cool, moist atmosphere, shielding us from the sweltering summer heat outside the creek's confines. We were about 1/3 into the creek when we had a rather disturbing experience. We were suddenly startled by a piercing, high-pitched sound that seemed to reverberate through the air. It was so intense that it hurt our ears, and at the same time, our hair stood on end as if we were electrically charged. It was a bizarre sensation, leaving us feeling confused and concerned. We couldn't pinpoint the source of the noise or understand what could be causing this strange electrical sensation. This unsettling experience lasted for about 30 seconds, and we were somewhat relieved when it abruptly stopped, our hair returning to its normal state. However, our relief was short-lived as the same thing happened again, only this time the noise was even more intense and excruciatingly painful. It felt like it would never end, though it only lasted for about a minute and leaving us thoroughly shaken. My brother and his wife were particularly disturbed by the experience and insisted on returning to the camp. Despite the unnerving experience with the strange noise, Cecile and I were determined to press on. We had our hearts set on reaching the cave, fueled by our love for adventure as a couple. However, I couldn't deny that the eerie atmosphere and the unsettling sensation lingered in the air. Meanwhile, Rudolph and Mariska seemed thoroughly spooked. We reached a tentative agreement to continue a bit further, but if the noise were to start again, they insisted on turning back. As we trudged on for another 10 minutes or so, tension hung heavy in the air. Then, Cecile spotted something unusual, a trio of figures standing on a flat rock about 50 meters ahead of us. The sight of those figures sent a shiver down our spines. They bore a striking resemblance to the so-called gray aliens often depicted in popular media, although they appeared taller than the typical portrayal. Standing there, about a foot shorter than the average person, they emanated an eerie presence with their large black eyes and grayish skin adorned with strange green patterns. It was as if they were staring right through us, and we were frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. Mariska pleaded with Rudolph to turn back, her fear palpable in the tense silence that enveloped us. The sight of those beings brought us to a standstill, Mariska's pleas urging us to retreat ringing in our ears. Despite our trembling fear, Cecile and I were overcome with curiosity. She reached for her camera, but something compelled her to return it to her rucksack, a strange sensation coursing through us all. As one of the beings raised its arm, we felt an intense telepathic message urging us to turn back and return to our camp. It was a sensation so powerful that we obeyed without hesitation, pivoting in unison and retracing our steps. With each glance backward, the figures remained perched on the rock, their piercing stares following us until they faded from view. Once out of sight, we remained silent, each lost in our own thoughts, shaken by the eerie encounter. We hurried back to base camp, our resolve to stay another night evaporating in the wake of the unsettling encounter. We packed up hastily, leaving the remote valley behind us. We shared our experience with only a select few, knowing that others would dismiss us as crazy. In the years since, Cecile and I have often pondered the incident, wondering about the identity and purpose of those mysterious beings. However, I have to accept that we will never have answers to our questions. It has crossed our minds to revisit the creek, but I subsequently found out that the farmer has since passed away, and his son who inherited the property no longer allows hikers on the farm. Regards, Johann. Story 2. Howdy. We've been ranching cattle in Montana for 30 years. On a 2,000-acre spread, we raise top-notch Angus beef. Life's typically quiet and simple. Recently, though, we've had troubling events on the ranch. A few months ago, while checking the herd, I found a dead cow in the pasture. Initially, I suspected a predator, but closer inspection revealed a gruesome scene. The cow was mutilated. Parts were cut out. These were very neat, clean cuts. No blood was present, which unnerved me. I've seen my share of dead animals, but never anything like this. I was puzzled and a bit scared. Who or what could be responsible? After the initial incident, things worsened. Every few weeks, another cow would be found mutilated in the same eerie manner. Eyes, tongues, and other parts were missing. Surgical cuts, no blood. This pattern extended to the neighboring farms, leaving us all terrified and questioning. In all, only 4 farms were affected. My neighbors and I speculated about everything from cult activity to government experiments. One even mentioned aliens, though at first the rest of us dismissed the latter as absurd. Despite vigilant nighttime surveillance, no culprit could be found. We became fearful. It felt like we were being watched. One morning, after finding another cow mutilated, I noticed strange marks around the carcass. Odd patterns in the dirt, not hoof prints or tire tracks. Nearby, some sticky substance on the ground, strange color, almost glowing. I couldn't recognize it from the farm. The sheriff took samples, but no word back. The whole thing was getting very weird. We were feeling helpless, unable to explain or protect our livestock. One night, it got stranger. Out checking on the animals, I saw unusual lights in the sky. Not like stars or planes. They moved oddly, changing colors. Strange sounds followed, starting as a low electrical hum, then louder and unsettling. Not familiar machinery or animals. Felt like it came from everywhere, making my neck hairs stand up. I tried following lights and sounds, but they kept moving, like a game. I couldn't figure it out, and it left me uneasy. My farm felt unfamiliar. I couldn't shake what I'd seen and heard. I was consumed by my thoughts day and night. I simply had to uncover the truth. I stayed up late, watched the skies, walked the fields for clues. My neighbors resigned to the phenomena and said I should do the same, but I couldn't. My farm was getting hit at a much higher rate than theirs. Each of them had only lost 1 cow by the time I lost 4. The sheriff advised me to focus on ranching, but I refused to let it go. I felt he was not doing his job. This was my livelihood. I needed answers. I set up cameras and motion sensors, but they only captured mundane activity and sometimes static. One night, everything changed. The lights appeared brighter and closer. I felt a strange pull, compelled to investigate. This time it was hovering very close to my house. Against my better judgment, I approached it. Suddenly, everything went dark. I felt a cold grip on my body, like invisible hands holding me tight. I couldn't move or shout. The next thing I knew, I was inside some kind of room. It was filled with bright lights and strange noises. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I could feel a presence all around me. I saw figures moving, but they didn't look human. They were tall and thin with big, dark eyes. I couldn't speak or move, just watch in horror as they did things I can't even describe. At some point, I passed out. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, on a field somewhere on a neighbor's farm. It felt like I'd been gone for hours, but it was still the middle of the night. My watch was broken, and my head was pounding. I was terrified and confused. My body ached all over and my mind was racing. I knew I had been taken by something beyond this world, and I didn't know if I'd ever be the same again. I stumbled back to my house, my mind racing. My wife was frantic, saying I'd been gone for hours. She wanted to call the sheriff, but what could I say? That I'd been taken by aliens? Who would believe that? Days went by, and I tried to piece together what happened. But my memories were jumbled, like a bad dream I couldn't quite remember. There were flashes of light, strange faces, and cold metal tables. I knew something terrible had happened, but it was like trying to remember smoke. I tried to go back to my normal life, but nothing felt the same. I kept looking over my shoulder, afraid they'd come back. After my abduction, the cattle mutilation stopped, but the fear didn't. I still don't know the reason they took me, the things they did to me. I don't know if they have taken anyone else from around here. I'm too ashamed to mention it to anyone. I'll never forget that night. I just hope sharing my story helps someone else. Maybe if enough of us speak out, we can figure out what's really going on. Regards, Anonymous. Story 3. Hey there, I'm going to go by June for this letter. It's actually my middle name and hardly anyone knows me by it. Consider it my pen name for the sake of your listeners. I know my story might sound a little odd, but I believe your viewers might find it intriguing. 10 years back, I bid farewell to the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles and headed for rural Oregon. I needed a break from the city grind. Just me, a single woman in her mid-50s seeking solace. Ever since my teenage years, I've been haunted by these unsettling nightmares. It's like I'm snatched from my bed by strange beings, subjected to terrifying examinations. I'm always paralyzed in these dreams, helpless to fight back. They faded away in my early 20s, only to resurface in my late 40s. My therapist diagnosed me with PTSD, a result of the turbulent childhood I endured. My parents' bitter divorce, the relentless bullying at school, and the weight of failed relationships. It all took its toll on me. Settling down in Oregon marked a fresh chapter in my life. I snagged a spacious plot of land just a mile outside town, nestled amidst serene woods. It's a picturesque community, a haven of tranquility. I was starting anew. Leaving behind my thriving beauty salon in LA, I launched a new venture in my newfound hometown. Things seemed to fall into place smoothly. My house, an elegant old structure, underwent a makeover, adding to the charm of my new life. Initially, the nightmares faded into the background. Life felt less burdensome. Yet 2 years in, the dreams returned with a vengeance. Doubts crept in. Was this fresh start fueling its own anxieties? The nightmares grew more frequent, more vivid. Desperate for answers, I turned to a local psychologist, but her explanations felt like rehearsed lines, lifelong therapy for childhood trauma. It didn't add up. How could my parents' issues manifest as encounters with unearthly beings? It seemed far-fetched. Feeling like I needed a change, I decided to explore a different avenue. There was talk of a hypnotherapist in town, and I figured, why not give it a shot? It was uncharted territory for me, but I was willing to try anything at that point. So, I agreed to a regression session. Let me tell you, what unfolded during those sessions was beyond anything I could have imagined. It's hard to put into words, really. I know it might sound outlandish, but bear with me. Under hypnosis, I unearthed memories of being abducted by aliens since I was just a kid. Yeah, you heard that right. Abducted by extraterrestrial beings. They'd whisk me away to their craft and subject me to all sorts of unsettling examinations and experiments. It was downright agonizing. The hypnotherapist urged me to embrace whatever emerged during these sessions, to not question it but to explore it. And each time I delved deeper, more details surfaced. It was like peeling back layers of a nightmare I'd buried deep within my subconscious. Needless to say, it took a toll on me. I felt like I was spiraling into a crisis. So I upped my sessions, seeing him twice a week for 2 weeks in a row. And just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, they did. It was a typical weeknight, not particularly chilly, but the rain outside added an eerie touch to the darkness. I was just about ready to hit the hay when there came a knock at the front door. Odd, I thought to myself. Peeking through the peephole, I saw no one. Weird, right? As I turned to walk away, there came another knock. Now, our neighborhood's pretty tight-knit, so I figured it must be some neighborly shenanigans. The local teenagers sometimes get up to harmless mischief. I crept back to the door, aiming to unlock it as quietly as possible. My plan? To catch whoever it was in the act and play along with their little game. I mean, why not inject a bit of humor into the situation, right? But when I flung open the door, I was met with quite the sight. Before me stood a man in the crispest white suit I'd ever laid eyes on. It wasn't your ordinary suit, though. It had that Nehru style, with the closed-up collar and no tie. But there was something peculiar about it, like a modern take on the classic. It lacked buttons but was impeccably closed in front. And the man himself, well, he was a towering figure, easily reaching 7 feet tall. His hair was the lightest shade of blonde, his eyes a piercing blue. He practically radiated with an otherworldly presence, if you catch my drift. Now, I'm not one to open my door to strangers, mind you. Nobody ever showed up here unannounced before. But there I was, standing face to face with this peculiar fella, and something about him just calmed my nerves right down. His lips didn't even twitch, but I swear I heard a voice in my head saying, "You have nothing to fear. I am here to help." Strange, huh? Against my better judgment, I went ahead and invited him inside. Looking back, I can't believe I did that. He made his way into the foyer while I locked the door out of pure habit, leaving the key dangling in the lock. My house layout's a bit peculiar, with the lounge off to the left as you enter. I was expecting him to follow me, but he just stood there, staring at me with those piercing eyes. "I am here to help," he repeated, and it clicked. I knew exactly what he meant. This time his words were spoken out loud in English, albeit with a strange accent. It reminded me a little bit of this Persian hairstylist I once knew in L.A., how that fella spoke. Yet he sure did not look like he was from those parts. Unusually tall, fair-skinned, with a presence that radiated a feeling of caring. I just stood there, not uttering a word as he continued on. They have not paid you a visit since your youth. Mark the moment, for they are coming back. A year from now, they will return. My heart sank. He was talking about my abductors. Then he revealed more in a style that seemed as strange as his appearance. It sounded almost like riddles. I have the words etched into my memory. You need 2 guardians, creatures of the sort called dogs, he said, his voice serious. Then he carried on. 2 shepherds have a bond. The ones who haunt you cannot pacify those joined in strength. Your village has a shelter for these creatures. 2 are waiting for you. Go tomorrow and bring them home. You have 1 year. Bring your heart to theirs. They must sleep in your room. A quick message from our channel. Your support is vital for our success. By subscribing and hitting the like button, you help us continue bringing you these eerie stories. Your ongoing support means everything to us. Now let's jump back into June's captivating tale. And then he hit me with this. If the shepherds succumb, turn to prayer. The gray ones will not stand against the call to the higher one. Prayer? I thought. I hadn't practiced religion in decades. But in that moment, his words resonated with me, despite their strangeness. Desperate for answers, I blurted out, "Who are they? Why are they doing this to me?" His response was cryptic. Explanations cannot do. Nothing you can understand. Their goal is not to harm, but causing terror or not does not concern them. Their manner is the problem. Why are you helping me? I fired back. His answer was simple yet profound. You and I have a connection. They cause too much terror. I am helping you. Before I could inquire further, he said in a gentle, almost childlike tone, I am thirsty. Realizing I hadn't offered him anything, I hurried off to the kitchen to fetch a glass of water. To my utter surprise, when I returned to the foyer, he was gone. Nowhere in sight, not even in the lounge. I searched the entire house, top to bottom, but there was no trace of him. The front door was still locked, just as I'd left it. And I didn't hear a single creak, not even from the patio doors, which were also locked from the inside. It was a perplexing mystery. He had simply vanished into thin air. Feeling uneasy, I eventually went to bed. The next morning, I called my second-in-command, telling her to take charge of the shop. I wasn't going in. Instead, I headed straight to the local animal shelter. And wouldn't you know it, there they were, just like he said. 2 shepherds with a bond. It was a German shepherd and one of her pups who was already 2 years old. Their previous owner had recently passed away, leaving the loyal companions in need of a new home. Without a moment's hesitation, I knew what I had to do. I adopted both of them on the spot, determined to give them the love and care they deserved. Over the following year, I formed a deep bond with these 2 dogs, Venus and Rex. I spent nearly all my free time with them. They became my constant companions, sleeping by my side every night. I grew incredibly attached to them. I even splurged on an SUV so they could join me on my adventures. We became a family. In addition to my newfound canine companions, I found myself reconnecting with my religious roots. I started praying again, engaging in heartfelt conversations with the Lord. It was my way of reaffirming my faith. It had been about a year since my strange visitor made his presence known. One night, I was jolted awake by a sharp flash of light from outside. Both dogs were on high alert, their senses keenly attuned to something amiss. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed Rex's bared teeth as he growled menacingly, a primal warning to any intruders. My bedroom door was slightly open, granting me a view down the hallway from where I lay in bed. An unsettling sense of approaching danger tingled in the air, sending shivers down my spine. Swiftly, I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest as I fixed my gaze down the corridor. Soon enough, my eyes locked onto what seemed 5 or more looming figures. They stood short in stature, around 4 feet tall, their heads disproportionately large, with large black eyes staring at me and the dogs. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized them from my recurring nightmares, their presence casting an ominous shadow. Dread consumed me as I perceived them not merely as strange visitors, but as an evil threat from the depths of my darkest fears. Fear clawed at my mind, imagining the malevolent deeds they might inflict upon me. Without hesitation, Rex bolted into the hallway, his fur bristling along his back, emphasizing his formidable presence. With a fierce bark and menacing growl, he confronted them. Despite maintaining a cautious distance, he seemed poised to strike. The intruders froze in response, uncertain of their next move. My dread and anxiety intensified as I watched the tense standoff unfold before me, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Venus positioned herself between me and the door, her gaze alternating between the hallway and me, ensuring my safety while remaining ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Her muscles tensed, ready to defend me against any threat that dared to come too close. As Rex stood his ground, she emitted low, guttural growls, echoing his warning to the intruders. The air crackled with tension as the standoff unfolded. The figures hesitated, uncertain of how to proceed in the face of Rex and Venus's fierce defense. Despite their apparent intent, they remained frozen in place, their advance halted by the fearless determination of my loyal companions. Desperate for help, I reached for my mobile only to find it lifeless in my hand. I tried to switch on my bedside lamp, but it too was dead. In my terror, I realized I couldn't wait for the figures to approach Rex and Venus. I began reciting the Lord's Prayer, but halfway through, I found myself simply talking to my Creator, saying, "Look, you and I have become very close. Now is the time I need your help." I said it aloud, holding my hands together in prayer, while I stared intently at the figures down the hallway. Then something incredibly strange and amazing happened. I watched as they walked backwards, retreating from the hallway into the foyer, until they vanished from sight. The dogs ceased their barking. Rex emitted a few more growls, then fell silent. Suddenly there were 2 flashes of light from outside, and the next moment my bedside lamp and mobile phone turned on. I realized I had left them switched on when I tried them earlier, even though they had no power. The dogs still seemed a bit startled, but they were no longer barking or growling. I called the cops. When they arrived, I simply told them there is an intruder. They searched the entire house but found nothing and nobody. There was only me and the dogs. It's been 5 years since that incident. I haven't had any visitations from the abductors or the strange tall white man again. Venus is getting on, and Rex is now 7 years old. Recently, I also adopted 2 Rottweiler puppies, a brother and sister. It's kind of funny, but these days my house is like a kennel. I don't think I'll ever be without dogs again. Anyway, that's my absurd story, and you probably think I'm crazy. But believe me, it really happened. Either that or I am totally crazy. Sincerely, June.
Story 4.
Hi there. A few years back, I worked at an Antarctic expeditionary base. Since then, I have emigrated from my country of birth. Yet, in writing this letter, I must be cautious about sharing information. If I still lived there, I would not be sharing even this sanitized version of the story. Just to be on the safe side, I won't disclose our nation's expedition or specific details. Several nations have bases in Antarctica, most with security personnel for unforeseen events despite no official military presence. I was one of 2 security staff at our nation's Antarctic station, recruited from National Special Forces. It was unusual for someone from our unit to be sent there. My instructions were to keep an eye open for anything strange and support the 2 existing security officers. I was issued auxiliary arms, including 3 automatic combat rifles. The other officer was a scientist with Army training. For the duration of my stay, he would be under my command. We often joined scientific field trips. During a field trip by helicopter to a distant mountain range for rock samples, we encountered a strange disc-shaped craft flying alongside us. Upon landing, it swiftly departed. Upon our return to the base, we reported the incident to the expedition leader, who appeared unsurprised but agitated. 3 days later, during a dark and snowy evening, the radar operator detected something landing near the station. I armed myself and headed out, where I encountered the expedition leader, who indicated the visitors were there to meet with him. I objected, demanding to know about the visitors, but he avoided the question. Insisting on following, I stayed about 10 meters behind him as we ventured into the storm. We encountered 2 strange individuals. With their blonde hair and fair skin, they looked like they were from Northern Europe, though they were too tall even for people from those parts. At about 8 feet tall, they were clad in tight blue suits of a strange design. In the light of the expedition leader's electric lantern, their brilliant blue eyes were unmistakable. They remained silent as the expedition leader conversed with them, gesturing as he usually does. I never saw the strangers speak, leaving me clueless about the meeting's purpose. After a brief encounter, we returned to the base and they departed. The expedition leader insisted on secrecy. We officially reported a radar glitch, though the operator disagreed. The following day, expeditions to the valley were halted. That night, I received an email from our capital city instructing secrecy and readiness for any potential threat. The next day, a large American naval helicopter arrived unannounced, with heavily armed personnel, sparking concern about their intentions. Our nation is neither allied with nor an enemy of the U.S., so it was surprising when we were instructed to arm ourselves. I equipped myself and the other security personnel with combat rifles and other weaponry. Despite our preparations, we were no match for the armed Americans. Our expedition leader advised us to stay in the background during the encounter, walking behind him and the chief science officer. The American delegation met with our leaders at the helipad, while we followed at a distance, as instructed. The Americans were led by their commanding officer and a mysterious man in civilian attire, both walking well ahead of their security detail. Seeing their 8 Marines made me very uneasy, as it seemed like a small invasion force. Our entire Antarctic station staff, mostly scientists, was only slightly larger than the American group. With just 2 security personnel, we were utterly outnumbered. Yet, our intention was a peaceful engagement. I observed a peculiar sight among the Americans, something I can only describe as a non-human figure, reminiscent of the stereotypical gray aliens from popular culture. It was initially walking behind the Marines and the reason we did not spot it at first. That sight unsettled us. This being, about 4 feet tall with a large head and huge black eyes, stood in the background with their security staff while their commanding officer and the civilian man conferred with our expedition leader. Despite witnessing many unusual events, this encounter stood out. The tension was palpable as our expedition leader and the American leaders interacted, though I couldn't discern their conversation. There was a lot of gesturing and what seemed like shouting going on. Eventually, the strange being approached the American leader, touching his hand. The moment that happened, the Americans immediately turned around, all together, seemingly without any greeting, got on their helicopter, and left. I remain in the dark about the open-air meeting. It felt like a tense standoff, and we were bound by secrecy. Following a tele-debrief with our HQ, I was instructed to stay vigilant, especially regarding American activity, and to bar them from the base under any circumstances. Upon returning home, I found the entire experience unsettling. I still have lingering questions about its purpose and my role. Despite this, perhaps my specialized security skills were the main reason for my deployment, ready for any unforeseen circumstances. Everything else is a mystery. My experiences on that strange continent will forever puzzle me. Regards, Joe X. Story 5. It was the 70s. I was just a kid, only 12 years old, tagging along with my younger sister and our parents on a rural road north of Adelaide in South Australia. It was a lazy Sunday evening, and we were heading back to Adelaide after spending the weekend visiting family on a farm. To make the long drive more bearable, we had the radio playing in the background. It was Mom who first spotted it, 3 lights hovering out on the plain. She casually remarked, "I wonder where those folks are going," and we all glanced over, mildly interested. At first, we thought they might be cars driving along a farm road, but then, out of nowhere, one of the lights shot straight up into the sky. Dad couldn't help but blurt out the F word, and all 4 of us were left staring in amazement at the unexpected spectacle. Of course, Mom scolded Dad for cussing, though she was equally surprised. Despite the strangeness of it all, we weren't exactly scared. After all, the lights seemed distant enough not to pose any immediate threat. Dad speculated that it might be the Air Force conducting experiments in collaboration with the Americans. Australia has long been allied with the USA militarily, so it wouldn't be surprising if it were some sort of experimental secret vehicle. After all, no known airplane could accelerate so rapidly, he reasoned. As we continued our drive, we couldn't help but keep our eyes fixed on those lights, fascinated by the spectacle. This carried on for a few minutes. Though the lights seemed far in the distance, it almost appeared like it was matching our speed and direction. Then, without warning, all 3 of them shot off at incredible speed in different directions and vanished into the night sky. It was a truly bizarre sight that left us all puzzled. As we left the plains behind and entered a more hilly area, the road wound its way between these low hills, and that's when things took a strange turn. Approaching a bend, Dad pointed out a glow emanating from around the curve. Suddenly, the radio started crackling and then completely lost its signal. As we rounded the bend, we were met with the most otherworldly sight. In front of us, hovering over the road, was a stationary disc-shaped craft. It gleamed metallic under the glow of various white lights. We were in awe, but also shocked. What chilled us to the bone was what lay beneath it. A car, motionless on the road, bathed in the craft's eerie beam of light. The craft itself appeared to be about 100 feet above the ground, its diameter spanning roughly 200 feet, according to Dad's later estimate. We were about 200 meters away from the scene. At that very moment, our car seemed to lose power. We came to a standstill as the engine simply died on us. Through the stillness, we could make out the heads of the people inside the car under the craft. That image is seared into my memory like it happened just yesterday. The vehicle, a light blue Holden Kingswood, stood like it was captured. I was terrified. As if what we witnessed wasn't already eerie enough, it took an even more bizarre turn. The beam of light from the craft intensified, and suddenly the Holden was lifted off the ground, hovering about 20 feet in the air. I can still hear Mom's panicked pleas for Dad to get us out of there, and Dad's frantic attempts to start the engine, but the car remained powerless. The starter refused to kick in. Just when we thought it couldn't get any more horrifying, another one of those crafts appeared, hovering directly over our car. And that's where our memory of that strange evening ends. Not one of us can recall anything beyond that point until the next morning. I remember waking up in the car as the morning sun rose, casting its early light over the horizon. Our car and the Holden in front of us were neatly parked on the side of the road. The occupants of the other vehicle seemed to wake up at the exact same time as us. We all stepped out of our vehicles and the family of 5 looked surprised to see another car and family there. All they could recall was the sudden appearance of the light, their car's engine dying and nothing more, exactly like what happened to us soon after. Though I believe they were there quite a while before us, as we never saw their car ahead of us during our long drive up to that point. Everyone was highly disturbed, but the 2 families found solace in each other's company, instantly bonding over the shared experience. They were from Adelaide too, which made it easier to stay in touch. Eventually, my dad and theirs decided to keep the story from the press to protect their careers and families. My dad, a local doctor, and theirs, with a senior job in the bank, knew that going public might risk their credibility. They seriously considered going to the cops, but ultimately decided against it. Dad said the event was so surreal and unbelievable that the police would likely not believe them, and even if they did, there was nothing the cops could do anyway. Besides, except for being somewhat shaken by the events, it wasn't like any of us had any signs of trauma or injury. So the experience remained a secret between our 2 families. As for what happened after we lost consciousness that night, it remains a mystery, as none of us has ever had any recollection beyond that point.
Story 6.
We received the following account from a family who embarked on a remarkable journey in the Pacific Ocean. Here it is. Hi, allow me to introduce us. I will use the name Colette for the purpose of this letter. My husband is a plastic surgeon. I am an art teacher and our son is an engineering student. We are French nationals, and as a family, we made the exciting decision to take a year-long hiatus from our customary routines to embark on a sailing adventure through the French Polynesian Islands and the Indonesian archipelago with a 55-foot yacht we had rented. As seasoned mariners, or boaties as some might call us, we set out on the morning of December 25th, Christmas Day, in Bora Bora. Our goal was to sail eastwards and explore the rest of the captivating French Polynesian islands. Filled with excitement, we eagerly anticipated immersing ourselves in the diverse cultures and breathtaking landscapes of these exotic destinations. The journey commenced promptly at 11 a.m. that morning as we gracefully sailed out of the marina. The tropical day enveloped us in warmth, occasionally interrupted by refreshing rain showers. It was when we found ourselves approximately 20 kilometers east of Bora Bora that our inexplicable encounter began. We did not at all expect to have an otherworldly experience. We were relaxed and relishing every moment in the tropics. It was an idyllic moment until we noticed something that defied all logic, an object resembling the infamous Tic-Tac UFO, the very same phenomenon that had been spotted by the U.S. Navy many times and which has become a political debate in that country after revelations of these sightings. This unidentified flying object was anything but ordinary. It moved in a strange, erratic pattern as if purposefully attempting to draw our attention. It executed maneuvers at speeds that defied the laws of physics, leaving us utterly perplexed and in awe. It was a moment that marked the beginning of an incredible journey into the unknown. Very soon, this strange object closed in on our yacht, leaving us all in a state of both awe and shock. In a matter of moments, it was hovering right beside us, mere meters away, and merely a couple of meters above the water's surface. It presented a pristine white exterior with a subtle sheen, and while it appeared seamless, every so often, lines of light would ripple across its surface, casting an ethereal glow. It emitted a barely audible, high-pitched electric hum that resonated through the air. As we grappled with the sight of this extraordinary vessel, I, Colette, made an astonishing discovery. There was a figure, a person on our foredeck. There she was, a real person or being, standing on the foredeck looking towards us. It was a female, though, unlike anything we had ever encountered before. She was exceptionally tall, easily reaching a height of 8 feet, with an otherworldly appearance. Her skin was an eerie, pale white, and she possessed long, flowing hair of the same hue, cascading loosely around her. Yet her most striking feature was her unusually large, almond-shaped eyes in a brilliant shade of blue. It was as if we were gazing upon a being from another realm. She was adorned in a flowing white robe that added to the surrealness of the encounter. I was frightened. The question that immediately consumed me was, how had she appeared there? We had witnessed no one exiting the craft, and the sheer astonishment threatened to overwhelm me entirely. My eyes widened in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the inexplicable events unfolding before us. It was beyond surreal. Next to us hovers this strange craft, and simultaneously there is this otherworldly being on our very own yacht. Imagine how bizarre a moment that was. The enigmatic figure stood at the bow, her gaze fixated upon us. It wasn't long before my husband also noticed my redirected attention, and he too bore witness to her presence. In that crucial moment, all three of us shared a profound telepathic message from her. We embrace you in peace and love. Be calm and join us. It was as if her words transcended spoken language, resonating directly within our minds. It had a profound hypnotic-like effect on us. I could feel my heart rate dropping and calm descending over my entire being. She then introduced herself as Talmi. At least that is what I remember. My son and husband have no recollection of her name. From that point onward, our recollections of the events that unfolded diverged into unique and individual experiences. While some memories remained shared among us, others took on varying degrees of clarity. The sequence of events slipped through our grasp, shrouded in a hypnotic or trance-like state. Certain details appeared blurred, almost dreamlike, while others retained a vividness that still feels like they had occurred mere moments ago. The inexplicable nature of our encounter had transported us into a realm beyond our comprehension, where time and reality seemed to meld and blur in profound ways. My son's recollection centers on our entry into the craft, an event shrouded in mystery. His memories of its interior are somewhat vague, yet he recalls an empty white space, dominated by 2 parallel benches, facing each other. He recalls no crew, no controls, or anyone steering the craft. He mentioned that though Talmi accompanied us, she was merely a passenger like us. In contrast, some of my memories are vivid and etched into my consciousness. Our hostess guided us on a remarkable journey through an underground city or base, concealed within a massive mountain beneath the ocean's depths. That is how she explained our location. She mentioned that though our trip apparently took no more than a minute, we were thousands of miles away from where our yacht was. Even my son, who vaguely remembers the inside of the craft, has no recollection of how we entered the base. It's essential to note that all of Talmi's interactions with us occurred telepathically, a mode of communication that defied conventional speech. The alien base was housed within a labyrinth of very large tunnels that opened on communal spaces and a variety of other venues and living quarters. The colony was adorned with a remarkable array of trees and other natural features that thrived in an environment illuminated by concealed lighting reminiscent of the soft glow found within the cabin of a modern passenger jet. Every aspect of this subterranean colony bore the same characteristic material, an off-white, almost pink substance with a matte surface. Organic, flowing lines seemed to define every structure and piece of furniture, creating an atmosphere that was both enchanting and utterly foreign to our human sensibilities. During our time within the confines of this extraordinary underground city, we encountered many individuals belonging to the same enigmatic species as our hostess. However, they maintained a respectful distance from us, observing us with what seemed like a gentle curiosity. Only once did we catch sight of their children, an unusual sight that naturally piqued my maternal instincts. As both a mother and an educator, I felt an instinctual desire to approach these young ones, perhaps with the intent to engage in some form of interaction or exchange of knowledge. However, Ptolemy swiftly dissuaded me from doing so. It became evident that they were intentionally keeping the children away from us, and our hostess's unspoken message was clear. There were boundaries and limitations to the interaction we were allowed to have during our brief stay in their realm. My husband, being ever the pragmatic and responsible one, couldn't help but voice his concern about our yacht during this extraordinary encounter. However, Ptolemy, in her calming presence, assured him that our vessel was well taken care of and would be waiting for us in the same condition when we returned. With this reassurance, he was able to set aside his immediate worries about the yacht. Naturally, he was inquisitive and sought answers to some of the most pressing questions that were undoubtedly on our minds. He wanted to know the purpose of our visit and the origins of our enigmatic hosts. To the former, our hostess provided a response that was as perplexing as it was cryptic. She explained that our experience was merely the beginning, part of a subtle process aimed at integrating their presence into our awareness. It seemed they were orchestrating a gentle introduction, allowing select individuals to glimpse their reality. However, she made it clear that they are in no rush with this project. She said whether it takes 50 years or 5,000 years, it is entirely up to us. Since their civilization has been visiting our world for a very long time, they are patient. They have seen us growing up, but we have much further to go. Yet, when it came to the question of their origin, her response was laden with ambiguity, leaving us with more questions than answers. François described her words as a paradoxical blend, claiming that she conveyed both that they were not from our world and that they were intricately connected to it. It was a contradiction that baffled us, and we struggled to decipher its meaning. Despite his persistence, the conversation seemed to loop in circles, never quite providing the clarity he sought. What made it more interesting was that she later mentioned they do have a homeworld in another star system. We found it all very confusing, though very interesting. Adding to the enigma, our hostess mentioned that we as humans were also from here, but not from here. The ambiguity persisted, casting doubt on the true nature of our existence. As for their mission on our world, it was to keep an eye. She refused to elaborate any further on that. She shared images that vividly portrayed our planet's most destructive capabilities, our nuclear arsenals, and the perpetual specter of war that loomed over humanity. Their concern for our species was evident, and it was a concern that resonated deeply with my husband, as it did with all of us during our inexplicable encounter. Our hostess, through her telepathic communication, didn't shy away from expressing a stark perspective. She stressed that certain concerns that humans often place great importance on, particularly one specific issue that I won't delve into here due to its controversial nature, held little significance in their view. Instead of fixating on these less crucial matters, we should redirect our attention to a far more pressing concern: the nefarious influence wielded by a powerful group of individuals who held sway over our world's affairs. According to her, this influential cadre of humans did not have our best interests, nor those of our planet, at heart, even though they pretend they do. She made it clear she will not give us false hope because They are not going to solve our problems for us. We have to do it ourselves. We are on our own until we let go of our destructive ways. Curious and eager to understand more about their society, I inquired about the most significant difference between their way of life and ours. Our hostess's response was nothing short of enlightening. She explained that their society had transcended the turmoil of war and serious conflicts, and even mild interpersonal disputes were exceptionally rare occurrences. The key, she conveyed, lay in their ability to telepathically connect with one another. Through this profound connection, they experienced not only their own emotions but also the emotions of those around them. This empathic link made them acutely aware of the pain and suffering of others, fostering a deep sense of compassion and empathy that deterred them from causing harm. When I pressed further about the nature of telepathy, our hostess elucidated that it was an ability that evolved through spiritual practice and growth. She made it clear that any artificial attempts to access people's thoughts or feelings will only lead to suffering and must never be attempted. She proposed that the most effective way for humans to counter their internal threats is through elevated spiritual awareness. According to her, the majority of us are unable to perceive the truth, and she emphasized the need for us to open our eyes. She mentioned that she chose our family because we see the world as the majority does. I must admit that some of the information she shared was profoundly enlightening and, at the same time, unsettling. It took us some time to come to terms with the fact that our entire worldview was flawed. This adjustment was particularly challenging for our son, as it set him apart from the beliefs of his friends. There were many more details she shared with us, but I'm hesitant to put them in writing. As an art teacher, I couldn't help but inquire about the lack of traditional art or decorations in their physical spaces, aside from plants and water features. She explained that they have fundamentally different interpretations of art and aesthetics. To illustrate this, she shared a telepathic image of their art with me. However, it was utterly incomprehensible to my human mind. I don't even know how to explain what I saw. She clarified that their art exists on a purely conscious level, and at a level of abstraction beyond the mental capacity of humans. Throughout the entire experience, she exuded friendliness and radiated an aura of calmness and caring towards us. We never felt threatened during our encounter. I distinctly recall us being led to a room as they gradually dimmed the lights in the colony. It was a space designed for rest, featuring 3 beds of similar soothing organic shapes found in everything else throughout their environment. Given what we experienced and the environment we found ourselves in, it was unimaginable that we would be able to sleep. Yet, I remember each one of us sitting down on a bed and Talmi saying, "Sleep well," and that is where our recollection of the encounter ends. Waking up the next morning was almost as much a shock as when we encountered Talmi the first time. When we awakened, we found ourselves in our beds in our yacht, as if nothing strange had happened. I never thought I'd find it disturbing to wake up in my own bed. I understand that our story may sound unbelievably surreal, as it does even for us. The profound impact of this experience has left an indelible mark on our lives. While my son rarely speaks about it, the transformation in him is evident. He has become more grounded, and our values as a family have undergone a significant shift. My husband and I frequently discuss the event, but until now, we've only shared it with our closest friends. We feel that platforms like this one provide the opportunity to share our story as our hostess may have intended. While we're open to sharing our experience, we prefer not to be publicly identified. However, there is another profoundly unsettling aspect of this entire ordeal that I've deliberately saved for last. When we ascended to the deck the morning after our alien encounter and found ourselves back on the yacht, we were met with a shocking revelation. Our yacht was moored in the exact same berthing space where we had left it on the morning of the 25th, before our inexplicable experience. It was as though we had never left the marina. What made this revelation even more disturbing was when my husband powered up his laptop. The clock displayed 8 a.m. on the very morning of the 25th of December, Christmas morning. It was precisely 3 hours before our scheduled departure time on a day that had already transpired, not to mention all the strange adventures that had followed. We were utterly bewildered. All three of us remembered the sequence of events, and all three of us were firmly convinced that we had been away for approximately 36 hours, a reality corroborated by my husband's wristwatch. It was as if everything I've shared with you in this letter had never occurred, yet all three of us remain resolutely convinced that it did indeed happen. This single confounding aspect of our experience left us deeply disturbed. In response, we decided to abandon our planned journey eastwards to the French Polynesian islands. Instead, we charted a course in a southwesterly direction, heading towards the Indonesian archipelago, seeking solace and answers in new horizons. Sincerely, Colette.
Volume 1. Story 1.
Buckle up for a truly astonishing tale, complete with mind-bending revelations that'll leave you shocked and baffled. Don't miss a single detail. Stick around until the end. If you relish stories like this, consider supporting our young channel by hitting that subscribe button. And if this gripping account leaves you on the edge of your seat, please give us a thumbs up. We'll greatly appreciate your support. All right, let's dive into the extraordinary. Hi there. What I'm about to tell you might sound like a fever dream cooked up by a sleep-deprived college student, but I swear on everything I hold dear, it's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It all started with a camping trip, me and my girlfriend, let's just call her Kim, that is not her real name. Well, we were young and dumb, blissfully unaware of the cosmic curveball life was about to throw our way. Picture this. Crisp mountain air, crackling campfire, the Milky Way sprawled across the velvet darkness. Textbook postcard perfect. Except the postcard ripped in half when we woke up the next morning, disoriented, clothes rumpled, and with a gaping hole in our memories where the previous day should have been. We brushed it off as a weird shared dream, a glitch in the matrix, but a niggling unease settled in our gut. A premonition of things to come. Back in the familiar chaos of college life, things got weirder. Kim, normally the picture of health, started experiencing these unexplainable physical oddities, dizzy spells, nausea, heightened sensitivity to light. Then came the bombshell, pregnant. Impossible, she was on the pill, religiously. The doctors were as confused as us, their test revealing nothing out of the ordinary. Yet as the weeks ticked by, the strangeness intensified. Kim's body became a battleground, her health fluctuating like a runaway roller coaster. 1 week she'd be glowing, energetic, the next, pale and listless. The baby inside her, meanwhile, seemed to be defying the laws of biology, growing at an alarming rate. The ultrasound session was disturbing. Before Kim and I knew what we were looking at, the technician ended the session. She seemed disturbed. She left. No explanations given. Both Kim and I were beyond bewildered, bordering on desperation. My countless calls to the specialist's office only yielded the frustrating response. "Doctor is busy. He will call you back." But that call never came. Determined to uncover the truth hidden in those ultrasound images, I took matters into my own hands. Parking myself near his car after his workday, the specialist was visibly shocked to find me there. There was no subtlety in my approach. I practically tried to force an answer from him. His bewildered expression shifted as he hesitated before urging, "Tell your wife to get an abortion." That's all I got from him. Nothing more. His profound fear caught my attention. I couldn't fathom why he seemed so terrified about our baby's unusual condition. Then, the arrival of a black van nearby intensified his distress. His eyes fixated on it, and the fear seemed to double. As I left, deliberately passing close to the van, the driver's window lowered. Two men in suits and sunglasses shot me an eerie look. As the doctor drove away, the van started up, following him ominously into the unknown. The fear gnawed at me, a constant unwelcome companion. It was this creeping sense of being watched, a feeling like unseen eyes were tracking our every move. Then came that night in the apartment. We woke up, not to the comforting hum of the fridge or the distant sirens of the city, but to a bone-chilling silence, broken only by the frantic thumping of our hearts. In the inky blackness, a presence loomed, unseen but undeniable, radiating an oppressive dread that seeped into our very bones. I am telling you, that night there was more than us in that apartment. Only the Lord knows what that presence was, but it felt otherworldly. We fled that night, seeking refuge in Kim's parents' house, the unease clinging to us like a second skin. That's when I started getting anxiously suspicious about the gap in our memories, the night out camping in the wild. The pieces started falling into place, like the strangeness of that event, the unexplainable pregnancy, the constant feeling of being watched. They all pointed towards something. Not of this world. The doctor's frantic insistence on more tests, his desperate pleas for termination. What further fueled my suspicion is that the doctor always had excuses not to see us, or kept the sessions ridiculously short, never giving any clear answers to any of our questions. To myself, I wondered if it was his way to punish me for the time I creeped up to him in the parking lot, or if he was hiding something from us. Possibly both. This wasn't a normal pregnancy, this was something else entirely. God knows what. Kim, bless her heart, refused to listen. Motherhood blazed in her eyes, a fierce determination that trumped logic and fear. She was going to have this baby, no matter what the test said, no matter what dark secret it held. Eventually, I decided it's better to let her live her naive dream. Denial can be bliss. I was hoping that she is right. I was hoping it's merely me being paranoid. If the baby was abnormal, we will have it anyway, if that is what she wanted. The climax arrived like a sucker punch. Kim went into early labor, the doctors acting frantic, their faces etched with worry. Then came those two men in suits, their expressions unreadable, barring my entry to the delivery room like guardians of some forbidden secret. It was like they were hiding something terrifying. When they finally let me in, it was over. The baby, they claimed, died during the procedure. We never saw the body, some fabricated story about a mix-up, an admin error. A wave of relief washed over me, an undeniable sensation despite the crushing grief clawing at my insides, a hollowness echoing in my chest. Kim was devastated. It was slow, but time heals all, and she recovered. The years that followed were a haze. Marriage, 3 beautiful, normal children, a life built on laughter and love. We tried to build normalcy and succeeded to a large extent, and that is our story. Yet it does not end there. Sometimes I wish it did. Ignorance would have been a simpler path. Something was off. It was both of us. Shared nightmares became our unwelcome souvenir. We never spoke of them, but the knowing glances confirmed our mutual torment. Weeks of normalcy could be shattered by a single morning, both of us awakening as if we'd relived that night in the wilderness. Every time both of us at the same time. Its synchronized nature was disturbing. These random nightmares could come at any time. It couldn't continue. When our youngest, barely 5, noticed our erratic behavior, his innocent question cut deep. Why are Mommy and Daddy in such a bad mood some mornings? Desperate for answers, we confided in a trusted psychologist. He suspected suppressed joint trauma and referred us to a hypnotherapist and her practice partner. Our separate but simultaneous sessions with the two hypnotherapists uncovered the horror. It all came out, or most of it in any case, or so we believe. Gosh, I think we would have preferred the amnesia. The memories were horrific. The oppressive silence of the woods, the sudden blinding light that filled our tent, the feeling of weightlessness as we were lifted skyward, the colossal metallic craft hovering silently above. Then came the figures themselves, tall and slender with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shimmer in the otherworldly light. Their faces, shrouded in shadow, radiated an unsettling calm, their movements devoid of human emotion, their large almond-shaped black eyes. That is one thing that I can't get out of my mind since the regression sessions. And of course, those creepy six-fingered hands touching everywhere. The details were terrifyingly clear. The sterile examination rooms, the cold metal instruments, the unsettling hums and piercing screams. We were not the only ones. They forced us apart. They controlled our bodies and movement. We were taken to separate rooms where we endured unspeakable experiments. From me, they extracted samples, a primal instinct telling me it wasn't what later transpired with Kim. For her, they did something far more monstrous, invasive, and unbelievable, manipulating her body and planting the unwelcome seed of that child. We didn't know their motives, but had to endure their cold touch and emotionless indifference. Emerging from the therapist's office, we clung to each other, trembling, tears mingling with the bitter sting of confirmation. Those fragmented memories finally coalesced into a horrifying whole, confirming our darkest suspicions. We weren't just abducted, we were subjects in some experiment, unwilling pawns in their grand design. Regular therapy sessions became our battleground, where we wrestled with the horrific memories and lingering trauma. Despite the semblance of normalcy we rebuilt, the shadows of our experience clung to the corners, whispers of "what if" clinging to the air. But the heaviest shadow loomed large, the baby, the one we lost. The burden became unbearable, a weight threatening to crush us both. I embarked on a mission for answers, tracking down the retired doctor across state lines. In a Sarasota restaurant, years etched on his face mirrored our own. He unveiled the truth, the 6-digit codes on tiny limbs, the oversized head, the huge black eyes like bottomless voids. Each unsettling detail chipped away at our hope, while the revelation of its survival, spirited away by shadowy figures claiming government affiliation, plunged us into a new abyss of fear and confusion. There's more to the story, secrets too unsettling to share in the open. But one thing is clear. Our journey wasn't over. The truth we found was just the beginning, a chilling prologue to a chapter yet unwritten. This wasn't a happily ever after, but a stark realization. Some mysteries claw their way back, demanding to be faced, even if the answers lead us deeper into the darkness. Regards, Peter Anonymous.
Story 2.
The following strange story was sent to us from a retired farmer in New Zealand. Hi there. Your videos inspired me to share our story with you and your viewers. As a farmer, I faced a grim battle with a rare blood cancer, one that offered little hope for recovery. With the harsh reality of my condition looming over me, I made the tough call to forego treatment, accepting the uncertain road ahead with a heavy heart. In the weeks leading up to Christmas of the year in question, our secluded farm on New Zealand's South Island bore witness to a peculiar phenomenon. Strange lights danced across the evening skies, their erratic movements defying explanation. At first we mistook them for planes, but their sudden shifts and unpredictable patterns hinted at something more enigmatic. Our farm, nestled in solitude and isolation, seemed a world unto itself, far removed from the chaos of urban life. The sightings of these mysterious lights became our own private intrigue. We refrained from discussing it with anyone. One night, a week before Christmas, as we sat down for dinner, I noticed through the window a light descending on the paddock next to the house. When it touched the ground, I could see it was a disc-shaped craft. Instinct kicked in, and I reached for my trusted hunting rifle, hands quivering with a blend of fear and determination. But before I could even grasp it, they emerged, creatures straight out of a nightmare, their insect-like forms contorting in the dim light of our home. There they were right inside our lounge. No idea how they so suddenly entered. It's like they just materialized. Their presence suffocated the air. It felt like the gaze of these four beings pierced one's very person. We were in a state of hypershock. Sarah stood behind me, arms protectively enveloping our daughter. Sarah recalls our innocent Lily seemed wondrously amused by the creatures, while Sarah and I was in a state of pure anxiety and dread. We stood frozen, trapped by an invisible grip, unable to break free from the fear that held us in place. Despite my efforts, my limbs refused to obey, rendering my weapon useless against the encroaching darkness. I don't think any words can describe what was going through my mind at that time. While you are reading or listening to this, imagine for a while being in such a bizarre and threatening situation. While doubting my eyesight at that moment, in fact doubting my very sanity, I simultaneously am confronted with protecting my wife and child against creatures that can simply materialize or dematerialize as they please. All of this while they control my body, rendering me absolutely incapable of my duty as protector of my young family. The entire thing is simply too ghastly to describe. That experience left a lasting mark on me. As swiftly as they had appeared, they vanished, leaving us trembling in the wake of their inexplicable visitation. This eerie experience was a chilling reminder of our vulnerability in the vast expanse of the unknown. As Christmas Eve enveloped us, the air buzzed with the anticipation of the cherished family gathering and festive merriment the following day. Our joint families were driving all the way to spend Christmas Day at our place, stay over the night, and drive back on Boxing Day. Despite the shadow cast by my illness, we had painstakingly prepared for the occasion, fueled by the promise of love and laughter that awaited us. Sarah, ever the embodiment of resilience, orchestrated the culinary symphony in the kitchen with practiced finesse. The aroma of roasting turkey and freshly baked pies wafted through the air, a tantalizing preview of the warmth and joy that awaited us on the morrow. Yet beneath the facade of holiday jubilation lurked a solemn reality, a truth I had grudgingly come to terms with. This would be my final Christmas, a poignant reminder of life's transience and the relentless march of time. The events of the previous week were still on our minds, but as it caused no harm except for freaking us out, we decided that we will not let it feature in our thoughts for the next few days. If only it was going to be that simple. As the night wore on and darkness blanketed our home, a disturbance shattered the tranquility. I jolted awake, a sense of disquiet creeping through me like a silent specter in the night. Emerging from the comfort of my bed, I stumbled into the enveloping darkness, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest as I bore witness to a sight that terrified me. One of those very same otherworldly creatures was in our house. As I stood in the hallway, I saw it slipping into Lily's room like a phantom in the night. It seemed not to notice me, or maybe it was simply not bothered by my presence. Fear spurred me onward, my footsteps resounding through the silent corridors as I hastened to my daughter's side, only to find her bed and room empty. They have taken her. But how? Panic seized me then. I grasped for the phone, desperate for aid in the face of the unknown. But fate, it seemed, had different plans, as the telephone lines remained eerily silent. They were dead. Their familiar hum was replaced by a chilling stillness. Beside me, Sarah stood, her features etched with a blend of fear and disbelief. We found ourselves adrift in a sea of uncertainty, our world unraveling with each passing moment. Suddenly, there was a flash of light. I thought it was the craft outside taking off, whisking our daughter away. Only the Lord knows where to. And then, as if beckoned by some unseen force, a wave of dizziness swept over us. The next moment I felt sick. I remember Sarah saying her head is spinning. Strangely, we both fell unconscious, right there by the phone, both of us at the same time. If it was not so strange, I would have said our collapse was brought on by sheer shock, but I firmly believe it was something else. Look, both Sarah and I, even amidst my illness, were pretty level-headed people. We're not the type to simply faint. The morning broke with the events of the night before veiled in a haze of uncertainty. As awareness slowly returned, I found solace beneath the covers, Sarah's reassuring presence by my side offering comfort in the midst of turmoil. The covers? In bed? How did we get to bed? My last memory was of us losing consciousness in the hall by the phone, but then a worse memory. Lily. They've taken Lily. Then something unexpected and beautiful happened. A sweet, innocent voice beckoned us from our slumber, drawing us to the warmth of the lounge. There, bathed in the soft morning light, sat Lily, her laughter a melody that chased away the dread and fear. Relief washed over us like a tidal wave, cleansing our hearts of doubt and anxiety. She was safe, untouched by the darkness that had threatened to consume us. We held her close. Her embrace was the ultimate gift I would receive on that Christmas day. As we basked in the joy of her presence, a sense of peace settled over our home, a peace forged by the unbreakable bonds of family. We never discussed the events of the previous night or days with our family. Despite the horrific events leading up to our Christmas, the day itself turned out a beautiful experience of love and joy. As it was going to be my last, I only wanted to focus on making that Christmas the best memory for Sarah, Lily, and our folks. We kept it that way throughout the festive season. New Year's came and was another joyous event with friends and family. Yet, after that, life had to return to its normal routine, and with that returned the doubt and fear. Beneath the surface, a lingering doubt nagged at us, a question unanswered. What had truly transpired on that fateful night? And why did Lily's memories remain veiled in mystery, her innocence untainted by the chaos that had engulfed us? We sought answers as the new year broke. Without revealing too much, as we did not want them to think we were crazy, we had Lily checked out by a pediatrician and a psychologist. Both found her to be in excellent health and zero sign of trauma of any kind. So, the truth remained elusive. Lily, a beacon of hope, stood unwavering in her innocence, her laughter a reminder of the resilience of youth in the face of uncertainty. However, her apparent lack of any trauma amidst what happened to her puzzled us. Yet, we were grateful our daughter was unscathed by whatever happened to her. Then February came, and it was time for my visit to the oncologist. Even though I knew what the path forward looked like, these visits were required to manage my condition as best as the clinicians could. I steeled myself for the tests and examinations. Blood was taken, and we had to be back for a follow-up the next day. I prepared for the inevitable affirmation that the cancer is staying its course. My only dread was that it might be speeding up, which would mean even less time with my family. When the specialist finally entered with an expression of confusion, I knew he had further bad news for us. Then, our world changed. His words, when they came, shattered the darkness like a beam of light. Your cancer is gone. I will never forget his words. I remember him saying something like, "You are extraordinarily lucky. This type of cancer simply does not disappear by itself. Besides, severe cases like yours have never been successfully treated. Yet here you are, clean, without any treatment. More tests were done, but they all confirmed the same. It was a miracle, pure and simple, a reprieve from the brink of death that defied all reason. Jubilation surged through me as we made our way home, hope and gratitude intertwining in a dance of newfound life. Yet with all that I had to celebrate, something was unresolved. At the edges of my consciousness, something was awakening, an unwelcome guest in the midst of celebration. And then, like a storm on the horizon, the nightmares descended, a relentless onslaught of visions and memories, each more nightmarish than the last. Strange lights and alien faces haunted my dreams, their presence a specter that loomed over me in the dead of night. With each passing day, the memories grew more vivid, more visceral, until the terror etched into my being. I relived the ordeal in agonizing detail, the chill of extraterrestrial surgical instruments, the searing pain of probing incisions, grotesque needles, and more, all inflicted by beings that seemed devoid of empathy or remorse. Amidst the darkness, a paradox emerged. It was bittersweet, for within their cruelty, the insectoid creatures bestowed upon me a gift beyond measure, a second chance at life earned through pain, sheer dread, and horror. The ordeal is too harrowing to recount in further detail. I cannot fathom why the creatures subjected me to such torment. Lily, now married with 3 beautiful children, remains as joyful and vibrant as ever, untouched by the events that transpired all those years ago. Despite undergoing regression hypnosis at our urging, she recalls nothing of significance. Curiously, it appears she was never abducted. Sarah and I seem to have manufactured memories of searching for her at home. Sarah never developed any nightmares or memories even remotely like mine. After all our anxieties about the apparent abduction of Lily, it seems that I was the only one who got taken. The motives behind the creature's actions remain shrouded in mystery. Nevertheless, their intervention led to my survival. Faced with the choice between enduring these haunting memories and succumbing to cancer, is there truly a choice? Thousands of beautiful memories created by a long and fulfilling family life have made the horror of the abduction 100% worth it. Yours, Joe.
Story 3.
We received a chilling account from a brave individual who endured a harrowing encounter with enigmatic beings from another world. In this video, we delve into the spine-tingling story of their abduction and the shocking twist that left us questioning the nature of such abductions. I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to share an experience with you, something that happened to me one fateful night that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. It was a late weekend night, and I found myself driving down a desolate stretch of road, surrounded by farms and dense forestry. The full moon bathed the landscape in an eerie, silver glow, and I was deep in the heart of nowhere. As I continued my journey, I noticed an unusual light in my rearview mirror. At first, I dismissed it, thinking it was either another vehicle or the radiant full moon casting unusual shadows. However, my unease grew when a sharp beam of light suddenly engulfed my car. Panic coursed through my veins as my vehicle began losing power, the engine sputtering to a halt and every electrical system shutting down. With trepidation, I stepped out of my car to investigate the source of this mysterious light. What I encountered next would defy all reason and logic. A flying saucer, yes, a UFO. The sight was unlike anything I had ever seen. It had landed right in the middle of the road. My heart raced as I watched in awe and terror as 3 small gray beings emerged from the craft. I know this might sound unreal, but the experience was real and simply terrifying. These beings were small, no taller than 3 feet, with slender bodies and a gray complexion. Their heads were disproportionately large, featuring oversized, pitch-black almond-shaped eyes that shimmered with an otherworldly intelligence. They only had the slightest of noses and what seemed like slits for ears. Their mouths were also subtle, lipless slits. Their fingers were long and delicate. These small but scary beings were clad in sleek, form-fitting bodysuits that bore an eerie, jet-black hue. The fabric seemed to adhere closely to their diminutive frames, emphasizing their slender and otherworldly appearances. These suits appeared to be made of a material unlike any I had ever encountered, possessing a peculiar sheen that hinted at an advanced and unfamiliar technology. The texture of the suits had an almost metallic quality to them, adding to the otherworldly aura that surrounded these beings. It was as if these beings, dressed in their enigmatic black suits, were emissaries from a realm that defied human comprehension, leaving me with more questions than answers. As they approached me, walking with an uncanny grace, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, as if they were communicating with me through some form of telepathy. They moved in unison, their movements fluid and synchronized. Without uttering a word, they conveyed a sense of urgency, gently guiding me toward the entrance of their craft. It was as if they had the ability to exert control over my actions, making resistance futile. The hypnotic spell they cast upon me left me with no choice but to follow their lead, stepping through the metallic threshold of their enigmatic vessel and into an entirely new and unsettling reality. Inside the alien craft, I found myself in a room that defied any earthly description. The walls seemed to be constructed from a seamless, silvery metallic material, casting an otherworldly shimmer across the entire chamber. There were no discernible corners or edges, creating an unsettling feeling of disorientation. The room was bathed in a soft, bluish light that emitted from concealed sources, casting eerie shadows in every direction. In the center of the room lay a peculiar silvery metal slab, its surface smooth and polished to a mirror-like sheen. The slab had restraints of an unknown design, composed of a material that resembled a translucent, gel-like substance. These restraints seemed to respond to the touch of the aliens, conforming perfectly to the contours of my body as they secured me in place. It was as if the slab itself was a living entity, adapting to their will. Surrounding the slab were an array of strange and intricate instruments unlike anything found in human technology. Some emitted faint, rhythmic hums, while others displayed holographic readouts that I couldn't comprehend. Tubes and wires snaked across the room, connecting to various devices, and it became clear that I was the subject of their experiments. The atmosphere was charged with an otherworldly energy, and my fear was palpable as I lay helpless on the metallic surface, unable to comprehend the full extent of what was about to transpire. The aliens surrounded me while I was on the slab. One of them pulled down a mechanic arm with a kind of needle extending from it. He brought it towards my eyes. At first, I freaked out, but then my faith kicked in. As I am a spiritual person, I knew I had only one resort of help to turn to, and it is because of my faith that I discovered a peculiar phenomenon. Every time I called out to my Creator and began to pray, something incredible happened. It was as if a divine presence filled the room, and I became certain that the Creator Spirit was with me. My prayers seemed to unnerve my captors, and I realized that my faith was a powerful weapon against them. Their fear was palpable, and it was evident that they were afraid of something far greater than themselves. It seemed to terrify them. With each prayer, they backed away, unable to withstand the spiritual force that protected me. As I continued to pray fervently, an astonishing and unexpected sight unfolded before my eyes. One of the little gray aliens, the one closest to me, suddenly exhibited signs of intense fear and distress. Its large, almond-shaped eyes widened even further, and it began to emit high-pitched, distressed sounds that I can only describe as a mixture of chattering and whimpering. In a shocking turn of events, the alien's body language conveyed sheer terror, and to my astonishment, it began to involuntarily urinate, causing its tight suit to become soaked with a pale liquid. The liquid pooled around its feet, creating a strange and unsettling scene within the sterile metallic chamber. It was as if my prayers had triggered a profound and unexpected reaction within the creature, revealing a vulnerability I could never have anticipated. This bizarre and surreal moment served as a reminder that, despite their advanced technology and seemingly superior knowledge, these extraterrestrial beings were not immune to fear, and there were forces beyond their understanding that could instill terror even in the most enigmatic of creatures. It was a turning point in my harrowing ordeal, as I realized that my faith had the power to influence and protect me in ways I could never have imagined. In a twist of fate, they eventually released me, dumping me by the side of the road not far from where they had abducted me. As I watched their craft disappear into the night sky, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of awe and gratitude for the divine intervention that had saved me from an unimaginable fate. This experience has forever changed my perspective on the mysteries of the universe. It serves as a reminder that, even in the face of the unknown and the terrifying, there is a force greater than anything we can comprehend, a force that shields us from the darkest of terrors if we turn towards it. Thank you for taking the time to read my account of this inexplicable encounter. It's a story that continues to both haunt and inspire me, and I felt compelled to share it with you. Sincerely, David.
Story 4.
Welcome back to our channel. We recently received the following story from a married couple in South Africa. Hi. Inspired by the chilling tale of the Balinese sea demon featured on your channel, I felt a pressing need to share the extraordinary experience that Marilise, my fiancée at the time, our fox terrier Joey and I had on a secluded beach in South Africa during the 1980s. This adventure, far removed from the era of instant digital communication, unfolded in a time when the mysterious still held sway over remote places. Our destination was a pristine stretch of beach along the South African south coast, known only to a few locals. This beach, hemmed in by imposing sand dunes and miles of wild bush belonging to a nature reserve, promised the perfect escape from the bustle of everyday life. The first few days were idyllic, filled with the simple pleasures of camping, cooking over an open fire, fishing along the shoreline, and the comforting sound of waves breaking on the shore. However, our sense of peace was disrupted one afternoon when we noticed something highly unusual, a strange cigar-shaped object hovering distantly over the ocean. It was unlike any aircraft we were familiar with, and it lingered there for hours, filling us with an uneasy sense of intrigue. It defied any conventional explanation, appearing too stable and solid to be a mirage, yet its distance was impossible to gauge. We speculated whether it could be a spacecraft from another world, but just as we were trying to make sense of it, the object vanished as if it had never been there. That evening, our sense of unease intensified. Unusual lights, which some nowadays might call orbs, appeared near our tent on the dunes, moving in inexplicable patterns. Their origin and nature were beyond our understanding, and their proximity sparked a growing concern within us. Thankfully, they kept their distance. Joey, our usually vocal fox terrier, responded not with barks, but with a silent, fixated gaze, an atypical behavior that only heightened the strangeness of the moment. Marilise clung tightly to my arm, her grip a mix of fear and fascination. Together, we watched, unable to tear our eyes away from the mesmerizing display. The lights pulsed and shifted, casting an ethereal glow around our campsite, before they disappeared into the night's embrace. Isolated as we were, with our campsite a considerable distance from the car and enveloped in darkness, I suggested to Marilise that we should consider leaving at first light. The strangeness of our experience had escalated beyond a comfortable threshold, and I felt a pressing responsibility for our safety. The morning unfolded with a picturesque haze blanketing the beach, the air fresh and tinged with the vibrant scent of the sea. The waves lapped gently at the shore, a serene backdrop to our simple ritual of enjoying a steaming cup of coffee paired with rusks, a timeless South African tradition. In that tranquil moment, the stunning beauty of the south coast was truly awe-inspiring, promising a perfect day for fishing. Regardless of the events of the previous day, Marilise and I decided to stay until the afternoon. However, as I savoured the last sips of my coffee, the peculiarity of the previous night revisited us. In the distance, two figures could be seen making their way along the beach toward our spot. Initially, they appeared to be just fellow beachgoers, perhaps out for a morning stroll. Their pace was unhurried, almost leisurely at times. Yet, as they drew nearer, their movement slowed further, revealing an eeriness to their approach. It was then that the oddity of their appearance truly struck me, sending a shiver down my spine. Their slender bodies, about my height, were entirely grey, their colour almost merging with the misty backdrop of the coast. Their skin, or perhaps it was some form of tightly fitting attire, was adorned with green, organic-like patterns that subtly shifted as they moved. Their large, featureless eyes added to their alien appearance, making it impossible to discern any gender. They eventually stopped about 200 metres away from us, close enough for us to realise their oddity, yet too far to discern any finer details. The most disconcerting aspect of these figures were those large, expressionless eyes, which seemed to be fixed on us. As mentioned before, this was a highly secluded beach rarely visited by people, so at that moment we felt utterly alone with whatever these beings were. I had already resolved to pack up and leave even before they got too close, but Marilise, pointing towards them, drew my attention to something peculiar. Joey, too, had noticed the figures and was intently observing them. Yet, in a departure from her usual behaviour, she remained silent, her gaze fixed on them but without any sign of agitation. Marilise, who was studying anthropology at university in those days, found her initial apprehension giving way to a deepening intrigue in these otherworldly people. I kept a watchful eye on the figures as I hurriedly gathered our fishing equipment. One of them had now seated itself on the sand, gazing out at the sea, while the other appeared to be observing the seagulls flying overhead. I wondered if they were merely pretending not to be too interested in us. With Joey calm and Marilise's interest piqued, and the two beings seemingly absorbed in surroundings, I reconsidered our hasty departure. Though very strange, there was an unusual sense of calm in the air. At times it felt like a palpable energy that was emitted by them and amplified by the sereneness of the natural environment itself. Then I thought, why waste a beautiful day for fishing? In any case, my own curiosity was beginning to outweigh my initial unease. Marilise tried to capture this extraordinary encounter with her camera. However, each time she aimed at the figures, they would vanish from the frame, only to materialize again as soon as she lowered the camera. It was a baffling phenomenon that added to the surreal nature of our experience. In an effort to alleviate our lingering apprehension and restore some semblance of normality, Marilise suggested we continue fishing. To our surprise, the figures kept their distance, occasionally glancing our way with what seemed like a dispassionate curiosity. This strange impasse enveloped us in an almost otherworldly sense of peace, leaving us to wonder if we were witnessing visitors from another realm, their purpose as mystifying as their presence. Then, the atmosphere took a sudden, alarming turn. Joey abruptly rose and dashed towards the water's edge, barking and growling with an intensity I'd never seen in her before. Her focus was fixed on the waves. Our otherworldly visitors, who had since moved further away and were seated at a distance, sprang to their feet, their attention drawn to the same spot that had captivated Joey. What followed was a scene straight out of a nightmare. A grotesque creature reminiscent of the Balinese sea demon from your video emerged from the waves. It was a massive entity, the size of a small trailer, and it bore a terrifying resemblance to a gigantic crustacean or arachnid. With menacing pincers akin to those of a crab or scorpion, it charged out of the water, heading straight for Joey. The creature moved with a disturbing agility, its intent clear and frightening. As we prepared to rush forward in a desperate attempt to save our dog, I noticed that our strange visitors were now much closer, about 50 meters away. One of them raised an arm, and from his palm, a violet light shot out, striking the creature. The beast recoiled as if electrocuted, emitted an unearthly sound, and hastily retreated back into the sea. Our greenish-grey visitors sprang into action without a moment's delay. Pursuing the creature, they waded into the water until they were knee-deep, and that's when something extraordinary happened. A bizarre blue energy bubble formed around them, similar in design to the larger structure we had observed above the sea the previous day, albeit much smaller. They positioned themselves inside the bubble, which then transitioned from being translucent to a solid silver color. This structure seemingly was a craft of some sort. For a moment, it moved like a boat tracing the path taken by the crab-like creature. Before our eyes, it dove beneath the waves, disappearing just as abruptly and mysteriously as the creature it had pursued. We stood there, frozen, trying to comprehend the surreal and terrifying events that had just unfolded before us. Still reeling from shock and disbelief, we quickly grabbed Joey and began to pack our belongings with a sense of urgency. The need to distance ourselves from that beach and the enigmatic events that unfolded was overwhelming. The entire drive home was engulfed in a heavy silence, with each of us immersed in our own thoughts, attempting to process the surreal experiences we had just endured. That encounter has etched itself indelibly into our memories, constantly challenging our perception of the world as we know it. In the aftermath, we often speculated about the intentions of our two mysterious visitors. It seemed they were waiting for the appearance of that crab-spider-like creature. Were they there to protect us, or were we unwittingly used as bait in some strange cosmic game? The true motive behind their actions remained an enigma. All these years we've been haunted by so many questions. Who were the green-grey beings? Where did they come from? What was their purpose? And the creature that emerged from the sea, it was something out of a horror tale. What was it? We were grateful that it never crossed our paths again. That is until I watched your video on the Balinese sea demon, which brought back a flood of memories and a chilling sense of familiarity. It's a story we've rarely shared, but one that continues to resonate with us, a testament to the enigmatic mysteries of nature. Yours sincerely, John.
Thanks for watching our UFO and Alien Encounter Marathon. If you enjoyed this super compilation, be sure to hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more spine-chilling content like this. Let us know your favorite encounter in the comments below. And of course, click the bell icon so you'll be notified the moment we drop our next video. Until then, keep your eyes on the skies.